Yeah, hello and welcome to day 2 of the Genesis of Androzani Advent Calendar for 2023. We are on the 6th year of doing this, can't believe that. And we are back with another alignment graph, which are the most underappreciated part of the Tiermaker website that I don't see enough of, because it gives you a three-dimensional, well, not three-dimensional, I guess it's more of a two-dimensional idea of how to discuss and rank things based on two different axes. And as always with these alignment graphs, I always have my, well, I guess I was going to make a joke about some kind of spectrum. I didn't know where it was going, because an alignment graph is technically a spectrum. Anyway, fellow friend, homosexual, and animator, Will Maddox.
There you are, there's my introduction.
Yeah, we're going to be doing something that's relative to your line of expertise, and it's to do with animations, which you have done many of on your channel of original content, and also Doctor Who content.
That is very much true.
Yep.
I have done animation for 10 years now. I have dabbled in many styles, cartoony, realistic, 2D, 3D, just across the board. And I think I'm well versed as an amateur, and I have a degree in animation, so
Yes. Now, because
that totally means something.
Now, because 97 episodes no longer exist in the archives of the BBC, there have been animations made of these missing episodes over the years since 2006. And and also there's also one other example at the very end, but we'll get to that. That's slightly different. But we have decided, based on a conversation I've seen over the years, of what is the best way to animate missing Doctor Who stories and what style. And often there is a sort of an idea of, should you go more cartoony or should you try and go more realistic? And the idea is to sort of look at all of these missing episode animations that we've seen over the years and determine whether or not there is a certain success rate of either style, or whether there is a balance, or whether some styles work for some stories and some styles work for others, depending on the tone, the set dressing, all of that sort of thing.
Very well put. I couldn't have put it better myself.
Which is why
that is what this video is about.
Which is why it's ripe for an alignment graph, because it fits perfectly with the whole structure of it.
Yeah. So.
Yep. And by doing this, we can sort of determine, well, what should we do with the stories that have not been animated yet, and what kind of style should they go for?
Yeah. It's an interesting topic. I don't remember. Did I suggest this idea, or was it something that you conceived of? And
I conceived of it.
Straight guy conceiving something. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Obviously, different animation companies have different styles and ways of executing their ideas.
Oh yeah, from Planet 55 to
Big Finish
Creative,
BBC Studios.
To BBC Studios, to Curios Entertainment,
Sun and Moon Studios,
to Cosgrove Hall, to Shapeshifter Studios. God, we'll get to that later.
Yeah,
they've explored many styles with the Doctor Who animations over the years, and that's not even getting into like the extra stuff, like your infinite quests and all that. But that's extra. That's not the real TV show.
Oh, that's a big insect, Martha.
Whoa, no way.
Or no, the Dreamland either.
Dreamland, Schalke.
Oh yeah, Schalke.
When death comes to time.
Richard Grant is the Doctor. Right, so we'll go in order of broadcast. We'll go for first the Reign of Terror by Planet 55 and Big Finish.
Yep.
So this is quite a divisive animation in terms of its popularity, I've noticed.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's one that I actually used to really like, and then years later, I was like, actually, I kind of see all the problems with it now. Um, it's a very on the detail, like realism part of it. It's definitely more towards the realistic side.
For sure.
It's very crisp. It's
Planet
very
55 have a knack for being able to create something that looks a bit more realistic, especially with their eyes. They make their eyes quite deep and real and sort of capturing.
yeah. The eyes are very yeah. They're very like very. The eyes are, funnily enough, very eye catching. There's something about them. Yeah, the details are very sharp. The shadows are very good.
Yeah.
They have a very good attention to detail, like across the board, really.
So
I'd say like probably touching the word.
Yeah, around
like
there.
that.
It's not quite live action, but as animations go in this range, it's pretty damn realistic.
Yeah, it's they've got a lot of attention to detail, not only to characters but also to set design, to body language, to quite a lot of things, to some sort of camera angles. Although if we're talking about camera angles, we'll get to that in a bit.
Well, yeah, this kind of has a bit of a clash, doesn't it? Because whilst the actual when you look at stills of this animation, it actually looks really nice. It's a really pretty design in terms of its aesthetic, but the main issue with it is its editing is really weird.
It's probably just to chill. That's all I have to say. I'd probably zoom in my hold on.
They wanted to make it seem like
it's probably.
It feels like they're trying to edit it like it's a New Who story or something. It's really strange.
Yeah, there's a lot of like.
And like specifically like a Series 7 story because it came out in 2013.
Oh god, yeah. It's not very it's very immersion shattering, I find. It's a very like
yeah.
You got this very because the Reign of Terror is already like it's your bog standard Hartnell. It's very slow paced. It's very slow, gradual unfolding of events, and then the editing is.
It's a pure historical too. It's very dialogue heavy.
Yeah. I also find one element where the realism isn't so strong is the lip syncing. It's not at all convincing. They just like sort of chatter their teeth together in this really weird sort of like 3D way that doesn't work. They're just like there's also some angles for the most part, the first Doctor was pretty good, but there's some parts where he seems to like really be bunching up his chin for some reason. And I'm like, why is he doing that?
Yeah, I've noticed this. There's a few animations that are like this, but this one especially, it seems like the flesh, if you will, folds around a bit and tries to force its way through, like, you know.
Yeah, it's like he's lacking a neck, and he's like, my boy.
It's almost like it's almost like whenever characters have to move their head or move their jaw, it's like someone's holding their hand under their face and forcing it into place. It's like they don't actually have bones.
I see what you mean, yeah. But other than that, like your Barbara, your Ian, your Susan, your Robespierre, your like all the characters look like
the costumes are real good. I will say that the costumes are very, very nice.
So yeah, it's like it's weird. I think I wouldn't say it's a complete failure per se, but it is definitely like kind of.
I think it's misjudged, really. The misjudged idea.
Yeah, and it's like it almost like the editing is the main issue, as is the lip syncing, and I wouldn't really say that's really an issue with like how cartoony or realistic it is. It's more just execution based, I'd find. Like maybe it's just, I don't know, their first attempt at it, and they just didn't get it. They just didn't hit it out of the park per se.
What do we feel about around here?
I think that's fine. It is one that I still. It is one that I still. Yeah, I still enjoy it for what it is. I don't like hate it. It's like some people do.
I feel like it would be a lot less. It would be less palatable if it was the entire story.
Oh god, yeah, that would be really hard to stomach after a while. I do know, like, when I first showed the Reign of Terror to Hugh, he was pretty invested for like the first 3 episodes, and then when it got to the animation, it's like, ooh.
I'm exactly the same. I really enjoy the first 3 episodes, and then as soon as the animation begins, it just like the story loses me.
Yeah, it's very jolting, and then eventually he just sort of started zoning out in part 5, to the point where we got to part 6, which obviously is existing, and it was like, oh, yeah, this is the story, yeah, and it's kind of
Well, part 6 has other issues with like the historical inaccuracies.
Oh yeah, but that has nothing to do with the actual animation.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a very it does kind of throw off the story. I don't mind it that much because I do just like the Reign of Terror as a story, despite its issues.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first half of the Reign of Terror is brilliant. I really like it.
I'm probably one of the biggest Reign of Terror stans out there. So.
Yeah, I love the first half of the story. It's just that second half, as soon as the animation starts, something just happens to the story, and it just kind of, I don't know what it is. It just doesn't quite fit.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if it's actually a problem with the story itself, or if it is like if it's just the animation affecting our viewpoint. I think it is the latter. Obviously, it's who can say until the actual episodes are coughed up. Maybe one day, probably not. But
it is really hard to concentrate on the dialogue when you got all this weird editing.
Yeah, it's really hard to concentrate. It's really hard to concentrate on the dialogue when like you're focusing on their mouths and it's just it's not actually lip sync to them.
Yeah, and it's almost like the way it's edited, it's almost like they're all looking at each other secretly, hinting at things, and it's like, no, that's not what's happening.
Yeah.
These weird zoom-ins and all that.
God.
If the sort of I guess the bulk files still existed, I would like to see this re-edited.
That'd be a good idea, actually. See what they could do. I wonder if the bulk file still existed, maybe they could render. I imagine that's what they might do for the collection sets. If the files for the animations themselves still exist on like a USB stick somewhere. Wow, a USB stick. How dinky. But if they do exist, I imagine like maybe for like the Blu-ray collection sets, they'd be able to expand them to 16:9. At least
that's
I imagine.
True, yeah, that's true.
I don't know about Curios Entertainment who did the Ice Warriors because I'm pretty sure they went bust, but I don't know, who can say.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know what happens to, the tape libraries, if you will, of these companies once they go bust.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Probably the people. Probably just the people who work there just get to keep them on their hard drive. It's like, oh yeah, I worked on this once.
Yeah, I think this Reign of Terror one frustrates me because Planet 55 have a really nice, unique style, and the editing kind of ruins it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It does get points, as I said earlier. Though it does get points for really because a lot of the missing episode animations don't really bother with environment work. They're just like, yeah, there's the characters, the environment, whatever. But I think the Reign of Terror actually does go above and beyond in like actually detailing like the sets. But the editing is still still a huge pill to swallow.
Yep.
I nearly said it's a huge bone to swallow, but that's like a mixed metaphor. I would have gone full Sylvester McCoy.
It's a huge bone to swallow. Alright, shall we move on to Galaxy 4 then?
Yep, Galaxy 4!
So I haven't watched the story as an animation yet, but I've seen the trailer. And I heard this went down quite well at the BFI when there was the big viewing of it.
Yeah, I was there. I think it was mostly because the thing about Galaxy 4 was, weirdly enough, the first missing story that I watched in full. Like, I remember like back in 2011, this was before episode 3 even turned up. So when I first watched it in full, the entire thing was missing. It was like back in 2011, and I was interested in Marco Polo, and I did watch like the first 4 episodes. But when it got to episode 5, I think I just lost interest. But Galaxy 4 actually sat through all the way through for some ungodly reason. I don't know why. But a problem with it is, bless whoever recorded the television soundtrack as it came out. It sounds piss poor. You can barely tell what's being said a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's one of the earlier reconstructions from Loose Cannon, I remember.
Yeah, but when the animation came out, God knows what dark magic they did, but it's sort of like not only obviously the animation helped because you could actually see like what's going on, but like the sound restoration completely changed people's views of the story, like to the point where like Samuel Davis was there and he was like, I never realized how witty the script was before. And I sort of thought the same. I was like, I never really realized how sort of like, I remember there being jokes in the story, but I don't remember that frequency of them. I don't remember it being that sort of like snappy and witty, but it surprisingly was.
Kind of one of the reasons why I really want the Space Pirates animated, because people don't really pay attention to the dialogue because of the way the recon is developed.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it might not be quite as it might not be quite as sort of, how would I say, like, it doesn't have the bounciness of Galaxy 4, but in terms of its dialogue, it does have a lot of Robert Holmes, signature lines in it, and a lot of people probably don't remember them because the recon for a lot of people is quite difficult to process.
I know you love your "it's like a floating bank" metaphor, or whatever he says in the Space Pirates.
That's one of the lines, yeah. The was it? It's been like two and a half years since I watched it. But something about like Milo Clancy is like glycerol trinitrate. Anyway, so yeah, based on the what I've heard and what I've seen of the trailer, this one, in terms of backlash, the people that don't like it as much say it's too different from the original.
Yeah, that's the thing that if check out the Universals, we did a group review of the Galaxy 4 animation, me, Matt, and John, and we did a sort of in-depth discussion about it. So I'll just kind of reiterate some of the points we spoke about it. But one of the things that they sort of intended to do with the Galaxy 4 animation was to make it more expansive, because the original story, a lot of 62 is obviously very confined because they have a very small set, limited props, yada yada yada, and specifically in Galaxy 4's case, the animation team felt like that was a bit of a detriment to the narrative they were trying to tell. So they specifically made the story have much more expansive sets, have the characters sort of like walk around a bit more, sort of have it be staged differently. Like, I'm watching the trailer right now, and there's like a sequence where like they sort of like invented a sequence where like the Dravins are on top of a cliff firing down at the Chumblies. Now, that's the kind of sort of expansive scope that the original story probably didn't have. Just throwing it out there.
I think this expansive scope works really well for the Hartnell stories.
Yeah, because the Hartnell stories are very weirdly enough, I was going to say Game of Thronesian, but I don't think that would be the correct term. But
well, maybe some of the pure historicals are.
Yeah,
like
what I mean by that is how it's a very slow pace and very
the Crusade and the Massacre are quite like that, actually.
Yeah. But yeah, they want to go for a very I remember them using the word pop art and Star Trek a lot. Yeah. Like, they wanted to go for that sort of tone.
It's very Star Trek.
And obviously, like, the animations, they sort of emphasize a lot. Like, I never realized there was a part where, I don't know, There's a part where like Vicky is a prisoner. Like while Stephen and the Doctor go back to the TARDIS, Vicky is like a prisoner of the Dravins, and she and Margaret are having a conversation, and Margaret like sassily eats a leaf, and and the animation sort of like really emphasizes that. Like she's like yas. There's also like there's a couple of like really there's another bit where like Margaret sort of like grabs Stephen by the throat and sort of like holds him above her, like to threaten the Doctor into like doing what she wants. It's like, damn, that probably wouldn't be what would have happened on TV. So it's a good way of emphasizing the story. Obviously, some people are like, but more accuracy. But by definition, these animations are never going to be accurate. So I think it's kind of a futile point. Yeah, I think my biggest sticking point with this animation is kind of the aesthetic style. It's just that Big Finish creative character design. It's not my favorite. Like, the characters have really weird proportions. Like, they have very broad shoulders. They have very lanky, like, Slender Man-like arms. Hartnell in that style, he looks pretty bizarre. Like, I can't really pin down what it is.
Well, he looks really tired.
Yeah. I don't remember why I thought this, but I remember, like, in my review, I say he reminds me of, like, Rick from Rick and Morty in this animation. I don't know why I think that. I guess it's because he's, like, old and gangly and stuff, but...
his eyes are too small.
Yeah.
He kind of, actually, thinking about it, he actually looks more like the way he looks in the Three Doctors than he does in the 60s.
Could be that. It could be the colour, actually, because I don't watch the. I try not to watch the missing episode animations in colour because I am in a. It's funny that I mentioned we're never going to get total accuracy or authenticity or whatever, and yet here I am being like, I don't want colour. Again,
it's the same. It's also the thing of like the thing with the eyes are just too small. Like Vicky's eyes are too small. Hartnell's eyes are too small, and then Stephen in the show is quite. I don't want to say buff, but he definitely has a distinct look, and the animation is far too soft on him.
I see what you mean, yeah. That's a point. It's the only animation so far to have Stephen and Vicky, so...
yeah, the colours are definitely very vibrant, though. Very
orange.
Yeah,
it's very, very pop art, as they said. The Dravins, they also made the point of making all the Dravins look the same because they are meant to be clones, and they were like, we want to emphasize that.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think that Planet 55 style is probably like the biggest setback. Like, if they
you mean the Big Finish style, not...
not Planet 55. Yeah, you know, the Big Finish creative style, like that aesthetic, their character design is probably my biggest critique with it per se. There's also a couple of points where they do use, like, I talked about environment work. There are parts where they use like 3D backdrops with the 2D characters, and sometimes it works well, but then other times it's really jarring. Like, there's a part where they approach the ship at like the Dravin ship door, and the Dravin ship door is 3D and it swings open. It's really obviously 3D, like it's not shells, or at least it doesn't look cell shaded or anything, so it just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb.
Well, the one thing I've always noticed about Big Finish Creative is that the people always look tiny in the rooms they're in.
That is also a big factor, which we'll probably get back to that with View from the Deep. But yeah, that is a bit of a thing with them.
I will say though, and this is something that I think is pretty consistent across all Doctor Who animation, is whenever they have to make something robotic, they usually do it pretty well, and like the Chumblies look pretty good in this. Yeah,
it's actually remarkable because usually with things like Daleks, it would be 3D cell shading, but with the Dravins, they are completely 2D, like all the time. There's no 3D used for the Chumblies, and yet they're able to accomplish shots of like them turning around in 2D, like distressingly well. like remarkably well. I'm kind of impressed by that. I'm just sort of like watching more clips now. I think it's also
The space shots do look very good in this story too.
the space shots are pretty good too. Some of the mouth positions aren't great, but that's just Big Finish creative style again. I think some of their camera angles are decent.
So how would we sort of think of it on the cartoon versus realistic front? Because I feel like there's a bit of both.
I'd probably say a bit to the left.
I think so, yeah.
Because I wouldn't say it's... cartoony, yes, but I think I'd use the term unrealistic more accurately. Like, it wouldn't be realistic to the 60s set design. So for all intents and purposes, that's what I will mean when I say cartoony.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sort of leans... I think maybe a smidgen more. I think that's good, yeah.
Because it does look... It is cartoonish, but it's not fully embracing it. It's kind of...
Yeah.
It's in this sort of strange middle point that Big Finish have gone for.
And... Yeah, I think it works. It's just, again, that I think Big Finish Creative just need to work. If they do continue in this new age of animations, I think it is like an aesthetic. They should work on their aesthetic a little bit, because the 3 they've done, they're fine. They're pretty decent. They represent their stories well enough. It's just they're a bit gangly. Those character models.
Yeah, there's some stuff they do alright and some stuff they need to work on.
Yeah. As for, like, success or failure, I'd put it just above the line, like, from my personal point of view.
Given the fact that it has caused people to like the story more, you have to give it some level of success.
Yeah. Because Galaxy 4 is a story that most people don't really care about. It's very, like, I think as a kid, I sort of like mildly enjoyed it for novelty reasons. Like, oh, they return one of the episodes, and oh, it's the one with Chumblies, and they're women villains, I guess. I don't know. But on the whole, it's not really one that people really gave much of a shit about. But thanks to the animation, people have sort of somewhat come around on it, I say.
No, JX was a big fan of it. They really enjoyed it.
Tharies really liked it too, and he was there. Yeah, I think it was like the first time Jean was seeing it when we went. Again, I'd seen the story like many times, but it was definitely the most I had enjoyed it thanks to that animation. So yeah, I would say it's pretty... In fact, I think I'd put it just a bit higher, honestly. Not like too high.
I think there's
like that.
There's something to be said about how this actual story's tone fits animation well. It's got a good... The actual... The whole thing of Galaxy 4 is... It works in the style of animation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Galaxy 4.
Yep. So now we have to talk about your BFF's your BFF Ian Levine's Mission to the Unknown. Now, obviously, Ian Levine's a bit of an annoying person at times. But to be honest, to be honest, this is genuinely one of my favorite animations. I actually really like this.
From what I think I've only seen it once. I remember it being fine. In terms of like realism, it's interesting because Ian Levine, he has a big like boner for realism. Like, it's the reason why he boycotts like all the recent animations. He's like, oh, they're not realistic. There wouldn't be a Sacha Dhawan poster in the background. Oh, they wouldn't have
Yeah. He's
extras of different ethnicities.
He's all about maintaining what it was like to watch it when it aired, is the kind of thing he's going for.
Yeah.
That being said, I think Mission to the Unknown is actually quite a kooky story in terms of its characters. It's quite strange, and it kind of allows them to actually do a bit of not silly stuff, but the cartoonishness of those, especially the court, I guess you could say, the sort of the round table of those ambassadors. They're all got very strange costumes in the actual episode itself, so that allows the animation to sort of be a bit free to do that sort of thing. But I'm just gonna watch it. Yeah, I really like the way the Daleks are done. I quite liked the way what were those the Varga plants, right?
Yeah, Varga plants, that's what they're called.
Yeah. And they definitely wanted to make the animation represent the actors in a way that could be recognizable. Like when you look at the actors and you look at the animation of the actors, you can see that they are supposed to be the same people.
Yeah, I'm just currently looking at the animation because it's been a while since I last seen it. The character designs are actually rather cartoony, actually. Like, there's a bit of an emphasis. Like, Mark Corey has a very exaggerated jawline.
Yeah.
Pretty thick eyebrows.
This one is from, 2010, I think?
I believe so?
Yeah.
So in terms of realism, maybe in the middle. Like, probably almost slap bang, I'd say.
Well, because it's got a cartoony style, but so does the actual story.
Yeah. The Daleks, they're animated in 2D, so no cell shading there.
Yeah. But the actual textures, though, they look pretty accurate, I'd say.
Yeah, the textures, the proportions of the Daleks are a little off. Like, I don't know what it is about them.
They're a bit thick. They're a bit thick in the neck, aren't they?
Yeah. And then they get really thin at the head suddenly, and it's like, oh. There's also, like... I remember the first time I ever watched it, and the only time, and I think I'm seeing that clip now, is, like, whenever the Daleks turn around, it's done in, like, 3 frames. It's like a jump scare.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Just like... So that's a bit of a knock against it. But the designs, they're pretty decent. I'm looking at the visual effects, like when Mark Corey shoots the Varga plant guy. It's done fairly decently. I think some of the character motion is a little stiff, like ever so slightly. It could be a bit more expressive. But it's fine. It's fine for what it is. That's pretty much all I have to say about set design. It's pretty decent, actually.
I like the way that the rocket ship looks, actually. That's quite nice.
Yeah, they get the set design pretty well.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the sci-fi chop. Mark Corey swats the guy away.
But I think that this animation was a lot more appreciated before we had the sort of when that university redid the whole story in live action.
Yeah.
Because really, it was the only thing because the reconstruction for Mission to the Unknown is appallingly bad.
I've never actually seen the reconstruction.
It's unwatchable, but the animation for this made it actually palatable.
Or have I seen? I can't remember. Like it, it all blends into Dalek's master plan for me. So
I know Dylan Lord Slaw. He's a real big fan of this animation. He quite likes it.
Yeah, but he likes it's quite opposite to him because he likes 6-parters and Mission to the Unknown is just 1 part.
Yeah, well, technically you could say it's part of Dalek's master plan if you really think about it.
Yeah, it's part 0 of Dalek's master plan. So as for success...
you could say it's an appetizer. It's a cold open. It's a 25-minute cold open.
So as for success, probably maybe a smidgen above Galaxy 4, just a smidge. or maybe just about on par with it. It's hard to tell.
Um,
I'm being
I
a
was-
little charitable to it.
I haven't seen all of Galaxy 4, so I can't fully challenge that, but from what I have seen, I do prefer... I don't have any big issues with the Mission to the Unknown style, whereas with Galaxy 4, I have quite mixed thoughts. There are things about Galaxy 4 that I think are better, but also worse. And when I look at like the character models, I guess maybe Mission to the Unknown gets away with it a bit, because we don't have any main cast members in it.
Yeah. We don't know who these people are. We're like, who are you? No.
Yeah, they're all like sort of, they're either Daleks or they're strangers, and that's kind of easier to wrap your head around.
Yeah. Look at the alien designs. They get it pretty well.
Yeah. That tall sort of dark figure with the white eyes, I think that looks really cool.
Oh, Sentry Owl, yeah. Yeah, I know his name.
Nerd.
Yeah, hell yeah.
But I think, given this is a low-budget animation made by a fan, I think they did pretty damn well for that, on that front.
Regardless of how shitty that fan is. But, well, I don't know if Ian actually did it. I doubt he did it himself. I'm sure he probably just commissioned it. But,
oh, for sure.
You know.
I don't think Ian Levine's an animator. I think he just has passion for it. He's probably more just like... it's more probably... He's like a director of it, but he's not the actual person grinding out doing all the work.
Yeah.
He's probably just the one saying, I want this, I want that.
At the same time, though, because you said this came out in, like, what, 2010?
I think so.
Long before, like, the current trend where making them look more cartoony was sort of, like, more generally accepted. Because it's not particularly realistic at the time when the official missing episode animations were trying to be realistic. I understand why it wasn't officially released, because I know Ian really wanted it to be like put out officially, and the BBC just turned it down.
Yeah.
And I think it's because at that time they didn't want to go too cartoony.
If they release Mission to the Unknown as a DVD, or if they release the Season 3 box set eventually someday, I want them to include this and the remake of it.
The U-Clan remake, yeah.
I think both of them deserve to be part of this story's, not canon, but at least viewability.
Yeah, it just depends on if Ian smartens up, because if he doesn't, the BBC aren't gonna want to touch anything he was involved with. God, I can't talk. But if he doesn't smarten up, the BBC aren't going to want to touch anything he's been involved with a barge pole. So.
That's correct.
God, they probably don't even want to touch me now, but... okay, no. For the viewers who don't know, Ian Levine really wants me to work in his animation sweatshop, so...
Yeah. I think this gets a balance right between being cartoony and also being true to the story, which makes... I think it gets, it fits being in the middle, around it at least.
Yeah, I think it's fine. At the same time, I don't really think about it that much.
What's unofficial? There are other it's unofficial, so you shouldn't.
Yeah. To be fair, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, what's the next one? I think it's...
The 10th planet.
The 10th planet.
We're back to Planet 55 again. Same that did the Macro Terror, but this one... It's also not Macro Terror, bloody Reign of Terror, I should say. And it does not have Big Finish's involvement this time. It's just Planet 55 on their own.
Yeah.
And this one, in terms of editing, is a bit more consistent than Reign of Terror.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. On the realism scale, about on par with Reign of Terror.
Mm-hmm.
For probably on exactly the same. Like, it has, like... It makes some realistic strides over Reign of Terror, but then it has its own, like, weird, cartoony things in itself.
What you were saying about Galaxy 4 and Reign of Terror about sort of... Well, I guess Reign of Terror really about character movements, but this one definitely has the issue of when characters are moving, they change. And there's some weird shots of Hartnell where his face is very warped.
Yeah. There's also a weirdly anime-like style I've noticed in this animation. Like, I'm watching the scene right now where General Cutler, he pulls the gun on the Doctor, and his eyes sort of like. There's a thing in like certain animes when like when they have really hyper realistic eyes and their pupils sort of like quickly grow and shrink.
Yes.
Like General Cutler's eyes do that. It's like I can't really describe what that is, but it probably has its own name, like as an animation technique. But yeah, it definitely has that. So it's kind of anime-ish. It has some anime-ish influences.
It's a very
The lip sync.
I mean, it might be because it's a part 4 and this is where the drama heightens, but it's quite a sweaty story, isn't it?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Oh my god, I just paused at like the greatest screen grab. Holy shit. Hold on. I'm gonna put this in our DMs. You can probably just put this on the screen for the video. That's amazing.
Yeah, you are right, and that it kind of has that sort of dark Saturday morning. So I guess what I'm almost say is like comparable to like an old Batman cartoon, because it's got like the Saturday morning aesthetic, but it's also quite. It's not very like vibrant. It's quite, chilling in some senses. And you're right that it definitely has sort of an anime-like style because it's quite exaggerated with its eyes.
Yeah, especially with that background extra. No, the lips, like the mouth movements, are way better than in The Reign of Terror.
Mm-hmm.
Though granted, like where the Sidemen are concerned, that doesn't matter too much because there's quite a lot of really like there's some moments that are just really aesthetic, if you know what I mean. Like I sound like a Twitter stan.
It's quite intense, isn't it? This whole episode is very intense, and I think they tried to capture that.
Yeah, there's a lot of really strong, like really vivid shots, like when they shoot General Cutler.
The shot where it's got like half of a Cyberman's face is very nice.
Oh yeah, there's like when the Cybermen walk in, there's like a giant sort of like light, not a giant light, but you know what I mean. Like it's really light behind the Cyberman, and it's sort of like silhouetted against the light. It's very cinematic.
I can definitely see this like this style being used in like a black and white comic book, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. And the likenesses are good. Like Hartnell looks pretty good. Polly and Ben, they look pretty good. General Cutler, Barclay, the Cybermen, they all look like themselves. The set is pretty faithful too. Including
This also uses a lot of shadows as well. It's very shadowy, which is reminiscent of anime.
Oh yeah. I want to find a specific thing that I remembered, but there it is. There it is. You may want to put this on the screen as well. The dildo phone.
Oh yeah.
It's iconic. Yeah, it does. The lining is really thin too, and that actually helps the realism.
Yes.
Because some animations have thicker lines, but that one is very thin, and the shadows. Yeah, as you said, the shadows are very sort of anime-like too.
Actually, thinking about it, this is almost more realistic than Reign of Terror when you look at it, because it has such an immersive quality to it. I think the issues I have with this aren't to do with what it's going for. I just think it needs slightly better editing in terms of its like execution. There's just a few areas that are a bit rushed, and it looks like they're trying to squash everything into place.
Yeah.
And some of the action scenes could have used better direction. Like there's too many wide shots during the final moments.
Yeah, I see what you mean. There's some body language that they get really well. Like I'm looking at this one shot where like a guy's at a terminal, he's leaning back, and that looks pretty realistic as to what it probably would have been in the story. But yeah, like some of the body language, in some shots it looks really like convincing and accurate to what it probably would have been in the 60s, and then there's some other ones that again like sometimes like they do turn in a very anime way into postures that don't really look quite natural to what it would have been. It's like a weird fluctuation between like extreme accuracy to anime. And that's not to say it's bad. It's just a bit. Oh, that's.
But like it's got some of the things you'll see in anime, but it also doesn't have any of the Japanese aesthetic either.
Yeah, it's very bizarre, but it's very good nonetheless.
I would actually be really interested to see a sort of. Just thinking about like a fantasy world, really, like a Neo Tokyo style animation with the Cybermen in it. Would be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, like that Third Doctor animation that's on YouTube somewhere.
Something like that. In terms of success, I think out of all the ones we've talked about so far, it's probably the best one.
In terms of success, yeah, I think it's probably the best of all the Hartnells.
Yeah,
which is interesting because I wouldn't have said that a few years ago, because I think back in the day I was just like, I don't really think about it that much, therefore it's not that good, which is kind of dumb logic. But no, it is pretty good.
I think it's really solid, but it's far from perfect.
Yeah, I think I'd bump it up a little more. In my opinion.
Yeah, I suppose because when you compare it to something like the Mission to the Unknown one, it's got so much more going for it. When you consider what it has to achieve.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some camera angles, and it's pretty. I think it walks a fine line between being faithful to the story and being cinematic.
I think when it's at its best, it's a great animation, but it's just not. It's not all the time. Like sometimes it's great, and sometimes it's a bit like, oh, that could have been a bit better. It just needs more fine tuning, really.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
I think it gets the character expressions really well. It's more about the how would I say? It's more about getting the action of it. Like the actual action set pieces need to be better, and the sort of some of the characters' head turning is a little bit like watching an avalanche. Like the way that their faces move, it's very strange.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's pretty successful for what it is. And it represents that final episode pretty well, honestly. Like, to the point where it's one of the missing stories that I'm not too broken up about the last episode being missing. Like, there's some stories where I'm watching it, and the fact that it's like watching the animation, I'm like, oh, it's a shame that it's just not the original visuals. But I think out of all of them, this is the one where I don't really notice it. I'm just like, yeah, it fits.
Well, I think we're lucky enough because the actual regeneration scene itself does exist, and that's the important part.
Yeah. But who knows? Maybe someday it'll return. Probably not. But
I would have really liked it if It's Far From Being All Over scene had survived as well, like everything from there till the end.
But it's in Twice Upon a Time.
Oh, I will say though, something that this animation does get really well is leading up to the regeneration scene. The close-ups on Hartnell, it makes him look really like close to death. Like you see, there's that close-up of his eye when he's looking at the TARDIS, and you can see he's almost glazing over a bit. That was really well done.
Yeah. And they replicate the regeneration scene really well in animation too. Yeah,
to be fair though, they have a very good source to copy from.
Oh, obviously, but like the fact that they capture it that well is pretty impressive.
I think there's definitely points to the fact that this one doesn't take any liberties. It's very realistic to what it would have been. It sticks to the camera scripts a lot of the time, apart from some of the close-ups. Like the close-ups are more than what they would be, but they only enhance the story rather than detract from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Hartnell animations.
Yep. All right, so let's get to Patty Tratty with the Power of the Daleks.
My boy.
So I've only included the special edition because I feel like that's the actual definitive version.
I was going to say the same thing. I think that I think that should be the final, like what we judge it on should be like the actual
Yeah, because
finalized.
if you'd actually given them the time to finish it, it just would have been like that anyway.
Yeah, and they do make some legitimate improvements in the special edition.
Yeah. Now
They
this
completely
one,
changed.
in terms of cartoon and realistic, this is actually very contrasted, because I feel like the physical elements, like the Daleks and the machinery, the settings, are all quite... I mean, they're not quite on the level of Planet 55 in terms of its shadowing and its texture, but there's a lot of... I guess you could say there is an immersive quality to the way the Daleks look, but in terms of the actual human characters, they're all much more cartoony by comparison.
It's kind of strange because, especially comparing it to later animations, like I'm looking at this shot of like Lesterson seeing the Dalek production line. There's a lot of shading on his face that is very Planet 55 like, but it's not quite that extreme. So it's sort of like that.
Yeah,
but not.
I think the thing that really saves the special edition compared to the original is they improve the lighting massively. It's so much better. They actually make it look like a three-dimensional set by changing the lighting and adding a lot more shadows to it, because the original is very flat and it's very draft-like.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
But there is definitely a lot of shots of like sort of characters not really moving their eyes around too much. And sort of just
yeah, there's a lot
there.
of... A big problem with this animation is there's quite a lot of shots of they need to fill up space in the soundtrack and they don't really know what to fill it with, so the character just sort of stands there and sort of does an idle animation and then...
Yeah, it kind of reminds me when you got background characters in The Simpsons and they just sort of stand there.
Yeah.
I will say, when characters have to look scared in this animation, it's quite funny.
Oh no, Daleks.
But my favorite thing about this animation is the Dalek eyes. The Dalek eyes are so good.
Oh yeah, they grow and shrink just like the actual 60s Daleks do. It's really good. Daleks are 3D cell shading, a technique that I think is for the best. They look incredible. Obviously, the humans are...
These are probably the best the Daleks have ever looked in animation, I think.
Probably, yeah. They even beat I think they might be Evil of the Daleks. They're definitely better than Daleks exclamation mark. That spin-off.
Yeah.
From a couple of years back that everyone forgot about.
Ugh.
I'm looking at some of the body language, like Lesterson sort of cowering in fear when he realizes it's the Daleks production line. Obviously it's like replicated from a telesnap, but they capture it really well.
Yeah, they definitely are trying to, because this was the first one where they tried to really update the look of the animations, and it's definitely different to the ones that came before it.
Oh yeah, it was the first one in widescreen, which
it doesn't have that classic animation look that Planet 55 would do.
Yeah. I'm looking at it now. I think the body language is pretty good. I'm just trying to figure out what to say, because I'm looking at the trailer just to... likenesses. Troughton looks like Troughton. I think Polly looks like Polly. Ben is a bit... Something about Ben I don't think is quite there. But...
Yeah, I've always had a little bit of I don't know, there's something about the eyes in contrast to the eyebrows about Troughton and these BBC Studios animations that just don't sit right with me.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I think there's the way that the eyebrows look and compared to the eyes in the Invasion animation and like the Ice Warriors, it looks more like the actor. Whereas this is far more like a cartoon of Patrick Troughton than trying to make him look like the actual guy.
Yeah, I can see what you mean about that, yeah. No, looking at Lesterson, looking at Hensel, looking at... Reagan,
I will say though,
Janley.
even though I don't recognise him as being looking like the way Troughton does in the live action, the expressions are very on point. The actual imitation they're doing of what Troughton's facial expressions are like in these animations are well done.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, like he does like the sort of... There's that one shot they reuse a lot in this story where he's looking over his shoulder and he's like kind of bunching up his lips a bit. Almost doing his little mysterious
There's a shot where he's like, it will end the colony's problems because it will end the colony, and they sort of captured like that tooth gap that Troughton has in his lower row.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's very vivid. Yeah, I think the likenesses are really strong. The set design is really strong. Again, a lot of the sets are cel shaded too. I think the scenes are mostly paced well. Again, there are the odd moments where they got to fill dead air, so the characters just sort of stand there and wait for their cue, essentially.
Yeah, that's the most agonizing thing about the real thing not existing, is that there would have been a lot of facial expressions from the actors to fill in those dead air in the real thing that you can't really replicate in this animation.
They do improve on that a lot in the special edition, because there are some, especially I think there's one scene in part 6 where they're like, there's Daleks. When I say run, 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 and then like in the original animation they just sort of stand there and wait and just sort of like shuffle off to the side. Whereas in the special edition they do shake up the camera angles a little bit so it's less awkward. It's still not perfect, but
the original also has that really funny thing that's been made into a GIF where like that sliding door opens and the Doctor's just sort of standing there.
Oh yeah. I love that. The effects as well, like the glow from the Dalek eyes, the glow from the Dalek I don't know what you call them, bulbs. I'm even like going back to the scene where Lesson sees the production line. I never noticed that they capture like the reflection of the glass window he's looking through. Like you can see Daleks in the reflection. I'm like, that's good attention to detail.
Of the human characters, I actually think Lesterton's probably the best one.
I agree. Yeah, it helps that Lesson has a very distinct face, very haunted face.
Yes.
Yeah, the Daleks look good. I'm trying to, because it's an animation that I think time has been kind to. Because I think when it came out, it was, people generally liked it, but there were some sort of dissenters about it. They were like, I don't like this. It's a bit choppy. It kind of hurts my eyes. But I think the more time's gone on, the more people have appreciated it.
Well, again, like I said, the special edition has really helped massively. It's far more immersive. It's not as distracting.
I'm hoping that a lot of the following subsequent animations can get special editions too, like Macroterror. You know, improve on perfection, pretty much.
Anyway, so in terms of cartoon versus realistic, I think this could be debated, really.
I'd say it's halfway to Reign of Terror. In terms of like the shading and like character aesthetic, because I know you say they are kind of cartoony, and they are, but I think like in terms of like the shading and like the lining and the detail on the clothing and the set design of the Daleks, I think it is pretty distinctly trying to go for realism.
I think when it came out at the time, I thought these faces looked quite two-dimensional compared to the previous animations. But then you compare that to like Big Finish Creative, and it's quite, you're like, oh, actually, no, this isn't as cartoony as I thought.
Yeah, I'm seeing it next to the Galaxy 4 one, like on the stream, is actually kind of funny.
Yeah.
But no, I think it works well. I think it's pretty. I think that's the right place for it. As for success, I'd say it's probably the best one so far, honestly. I don't know if that's controversial or not. But,
well, see, the thing is, like, I prefer the aesthetic of the 10th Planet one, but it's only one episode, whereas this is 6, and it's a full story. It has to achieve a lot more. But then again, if I were to make a direct comparison, as much as the Cybermen are well captured in the 10th planet that they, in terms of an animation, the Daleks are really impressive in terms of their three-dimensional movement and like the glow in the eyes. And
yeah, there's a lot more techniques used in the Power of the Daleks one than, like, say, the Planet 55 ones. Let's not say the Planet 55 ones are simplistic.
And obviously, this animation style, the characters don't have folding keyframes. You know, like all the character models are stiff in terms of where they're made, and they can't really bend as much as the 10th planet ones can. You know, they're a lot more rigid in terms of their rotoscoping, so you don't see you don't see as many weird, like, why is the Doctor's face look like it's been like molded by clay like it is in the 10th planet one.
Yeah, they're not like squash and stretch rubber clowns. That is very distinctly the second Doctor, and he will remain that way throughout, kind of.
Yeah, I think I'd be arguing more against it if it was the original one, because I think that one has a lot of problems.
Yeah, I think the same. Because we're talking special edition, I think I'd put it even higher than. But obviously, we're trying to meet a middle ground. I do remember the special edition having very good lighting. It's very well staged. Yeah. Excuse me. Oh, don't mean to yawn. I think that's a pretty good place for it.
Yeah. I just can't. It's. I think the problem is I'm looking at this one photo that I've put there, and that's one of the. It's just like
it's one of the more unflattering ones. Yeah,
it's one of the more cartoony looking stills from the animation. Like when characters have to look scared in that animation, it's just too funny. It doesn't look actually genuine. They're like, oh no.
There's actually a really good comparison on YouTube between because one scene they completely renovated for the special edition is the post regeneration scene.
Yeah.
They completely changed it. Like angle, like the character models are still the same.
The TARDIS walls are completely different.
Yeah, and I think it's directed way, way better.
Yeah.
In the special edition, like, because in the original, like, Polly's like, his face, his hair, look at it, and she's just standing at the edge.
In the original, the Doctor, when he wakes up in his little cloak, he looks like a fucking gremlin. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, there's that weird shot where it's like, it's all over, and it's like animated like 3 frames a second. It's like, why is it so choppy suddenly? But yeah, they definitely improve it in the remake, and like the characters are sort of more. They're sort of more active, I think. That they move more fluidly, they move more believably.
Yeah.
They sort of actually have postures as well, rather than just standing there like, oh no, Ben, he changed. What do we do?
Yeah. And I will say the horror scenes in this story work really well in animation, like with all the dead bodies at the end.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah, that's really good.
It also captures explosions quite well.
I never noticed what you... Like, I'm finally watching this comparison. I never noticed the difference in the lighting before, but now you've pointed it out. Yeah, it really is.
It makes such a difference.
Yeah, they're really flat in the original, and then they completely...
Well, I think the sort of flat lighting in the original, it exposes a lot of the flaws with the sort of the style that they're going for.
Yeah. But yeah, it looks... Yeah. Kudos to them for actually doing a special edition.
I still think... I still will say there are aspects of the 10th planet I prefer, but I think the 10th planet in terms of execution needs improvement. But there's something about that really intense anime style of Planet 55 that just hits the right spot for me. In certain scenes, I'm like, I wish all the animations, at least the ones where it fits the story, were like that.
I think that's fair enough, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we move on to the Underwater Menace, which we've only gotten a trailer for so far?
Of course.
This one looks like it's the most camp one. It's very vibrant and saturated.
I'm gonna watch the trailer now, just so I can sort of refresh my thoughts. God, yeah. Well, first things first, this has been long overdue.
Yes.
Because, God, that original 2015 DVD release is painful. It's hard to really say, because it looks like this is the BBC Studios style that it's sort of hard to talk about it on a chronological sense, because obviously this is the earliest chronological story that will have this style, but there have been stories later on that they had animated earlier, so it's sort of hard to talk about. But
yeah, it seems like it may be something to do with the fact that they've had to change the funding, but it seems like they've slightly changed the style. Like
little bit.
It's almost like this to me, looking at this trailer, it almost feels like a halfway point between the BBC Studios classic style and the Big Finish creative. It feels like it's a bit of both.
It reminds me the most of the Faceless One style, which we'll talk about later.
Oh yeah, it does actually. The sharks look real good though. I will say that.
Yeah, that is very impressive. Those sharks.
Yeah.
The set design looks pretty good from the 5 clips we can see. They look painted, interestingly enough.
I will say though, the biggest complaint I have about this is the faces. They're so generic.
This is a problem that they've had with Jamie for a while, but that is not Jamie. I don't know who that is.
Fucking yeah, they just, the faces are so undetailed. They're very flat.
Yeah, like that's not Jamie. Ben just kind of looks like a generic sort of like Fred type, Scooby-Doo Fred. Polly passable, and then Troughton. I mean, you can't go too wrong with Troughton, but
So I think with the trailer we've seen so far, the environment looks really good. The actual sort of the contrast of colors is quite fitting of the story's tone, but I think it's just the character faces and maybe the bodies are just so, I don't know. They are very cartoony, really, aren't they?
It's also going to be interesting seeing that. Obviously, it won't be the first animation.
Actually, it's interesting that you've mentioned Fred, because this does look a bit Scooby-Doo, doesn't it?
Kind of see what you mean, yeah.
Like really, really old Scooby-Doo, but without that really nice hand-drawn aesthetic. It's definitely like digital.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just going to say, like, obviously it's not the first missing episode animation that will have this discrepancy, but it's going to be really interesting seeing this sort of very modern digital style with the neep, 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 neep kind of music.
Yep, that's true. Honestly, I think on the cartoony scale, this has to go really far left. This looks super cartoony to me. Maybe not quite in the sense that they've made the bodies a bit longer, which makes it a little bit less cartoony, but the actual what they are going for, creatively speaking, it looks far more like a cartoon to me than it does like the actual story.
It's weird because I think the models are very, as I said, faceless ones, which we'll discuss later, and I'd say the faceless ones is more realistic than that, but everything else, especially the color palette, is so cartoony. It's so cartoony. It's very very bright.
Very thin lines too, isn't it?
Yeah, the background extras are very they're blindingly different colors. The sets are painted as well. It's kind of interesting.
I'll be curious to see what this animation looks like in black and white. I don't know if it'll work as well.
Yeah, it'll be hard to say. I just hope I can watch it with the surviving episodes, because obviously there's rumors that the release won't allow you to do that. But
well, I mean, it will. I mean, it will allow you. You just have to change discs around.
Well, I hope they change that and give us the option without changing discs. I hope they'll change that. But yeah, like the colors are very vibrant. Some of the character designs are very vibrant.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, maybe separate it from Galaxy, like put it a little space between it and Galaxy 4. Like more to the left. Yeah, there we are. I think that works. Success or failure, I don't think we can say at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I already have mixed thoughts on the trailer, but we haven't seen the full story.
Yeah, so I think we'll just have to leave it there as is.
Yeah, it is definitely one of the weirdest ones I've seen so far.
Yeah, we'll have to see what they do. We'll have to see what they do with the fish people, because I know Matt mistook, like, you know, the people with like fish-like helmets in the background.
Yeah,
I think he mistook those for like redesigned fish people at first. And no, it's just like the cultists wearing masks and stuff. It's not actually the fish people, but I'll be interested to see how they depict the fish people when the thing actually comes out.
I'm sure Annika Wills will have lots to say about it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Oh, yes, because all my stories were really interesting because I was on them.
Oh, yes, Ben.
Oh, yes, The Smugglers is a 10 out of 10.
Oh, me and Michael Craze and Patrick Trott and Fraser Hines. We were working so hard on the moon base, and speaking of the moon base.
And I was very ashamed of Bill when he made those comments.
Anyway, moving on. Okay, so I don't know how much of a hot take this is, but the moon base is my favorite animation.
Definitely not a hot take. A lot of people think that.
Yeah, I love the moon base.
And I don't blame you for thinking that. It's one of my favourites. It's probably my favourite of the original ones before, you know, the BBC Studios batch came out.
Yeah. I think this. I already made compliments about the 10th planet. I think this does a lot of the same things, but it's far more polished. I love the direction, I love the textures, I love the lighting, I love the intensity of it, like I said, about Planet 55's style. It's well edited, unlike the Reign of Terror. And it actually, it's one of the only ones where when you go from the live action to the animated episodes, it feels like nothing's changed, really.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's realism.
Super duper real. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much exactly the same as the others, maybe a bit more.
Yeah, I don't know if I go all the way to the right, because I think, like, there's a couple of characters where you can tell that they are different, but it is pretty on point.
Yeah, for sure. And in terms of success, pretty much right to the top.
Yeah, I don't see how you could do... Like, there's not much you could do to make this better, honestly. It's...
Because it's the same aesthetic, but I'm looking specifically at the scene where the Cybermen walk across the moon. They do take a couple of creative liberties,
That's true.
But they're creative liberties that work. Like, there's a specific shot, you know, when they're about to walk across the moon, there's like a shutter that's rising. There's this close panning shot of like a Cyberman's face with the shadow like coming over its face, and it's very cinematic, but it looks so good.
Yeah.
It's got that sort of like anime-ish thing again. More so in like the frame rate, I think. Like the frame rate is very like it's not smooth.
It's not quite as like it isn't quite as sort of inspired by the tone of anime as the 10th Planet one is, but it definitely has the anime aesthetic in terms of its actual animation, if you will.
Yeah. It's very frame by frame. Like, it's not smooth by any means, but that's not a problem. Like, it's very... Yeah.
The scene where that sort of lead Cybermen and the Doctor eye each other up is so well done. In terms of its direction. I mean, it's a great scene in the actual episode itself, but...
Yeah.
I really don't have many complaints about this one.
Me neither.
It's very impressive.
I think like maybe the set design could be a little better, but granted, I am looking at the scene where they're walking across the moon, and how do you make a barren landscape look super detailed? So it's a good question. But in terms of character designs, like I'm looking lip syncing, I don't have any complaints. Facial likenesses, again, don't have any complaints. Body language, don't.
I mean, I guess you could argue that like the Reign of Terror has better eye structure because it's a bit more realistic in terms of the eyes, but they still
possibly,
look
good.
Maybe the shadows are a little bit too dissimilar, but I guess that's just black and white TV, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe. And just sort of. Yeah, the characters look pretty much bang on. Like Jamie, Ben. Obviously, the Doctor is hard, but then again, it's really hard to make Troughton not look like Troughton.
It definitely has the anime thing of the further you zoom away, the less detailed the characters will be. But if you zoom up really closely, they put a lot more effort into them.
Yeah. Yeah, the body language is really strong. The shading is really good.
Yeah. The reason why I like this one so much is it's one of the only ones where when I watch it, I'm not actually thinking about it as an animation. I'm just watching it as if it was an episode. And that kind of...
Yeah.
I feel like that really does put points in its favor.
I think that's fair, yeah. So I'm just looking at clips of it now. Don't really have much to say. There's no complaints all around. Again, body language, like the way they sort of like get characters sort of... Characters don't just move, they sort of like swing into motion, which gives it sort of like a very naturalistic flow, I think. I can't really think of many like scenes that are too abrupt or, you know, scenes that drag on too long. I think they pace, like there's no... We mentioned that Power of the Daleks issue where characters sort of wait for their cue. I don't think they have any issues with that in this animation.
It does kind of have the anime thing of when the Cybermen move slowly, their bodies wiggle around a bit.
A little bit, yeah. And here's a detail which I don't know if it's just me seeing this, but the color, obviously it's not in color, it's in black and white, but it seems to be tinted ever so slightly blue. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, well, because the 10th planet one seems a bit more browner. It's a bit browner.
Yeah.
This one's a bit bluer.
Yeah, and I think that actually really, like, it's such a subtle thing, but the moon base is a very icy story, I think is a good description. And I think that sort of very slight color to that animation actually helps. It's a very subtle... subliminal tone indicator.
One of my favorite things it does, which is very inspired by anime, is it has a lot of almost crystal bright lighting on it.
Yeah, the effects look really good too.
Yeah.
Obviously they are drawn on, but like by effects I mean when they try and to depict, like I don't know, a Cyberman electrocuting someone, they depict that effect really well with 2D animation.
Yeah.
Or lens flare and so on.
And it's able to do sliding shadows quite well too.
Yeah. I think in a couple of instances they actually rotoscope scenes from Tomb of the Cybermen. Like, you know, when they throw the poly cocktail at the Cyberman on the moon's surface and it's writhing about, I can tell that's sort of a shot from Tomb of the Cybermen, but I don't blame them for doing that because that's a really good base.
Yeah, the poly cocktail scene is really well done, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're just giving this a tongue bath, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. I'll see. I'm even looking at, like, the death animation of, like, some guy and, like, the posture he falls in. Like, that's really good.
Yeah, I think the only real downside to this is apparently it's really expensive to make it this way.
Oh, God, yeah. To the point where... They would have made Underwater Menace in this style, but then they didn't because the animation team raised their prices. So,
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
If this is the quality they're producing, I don't blame them. obviously some probably very needy Doctor Who fans will be like, how dare you? How dare you, Chuck? Like, no, this stuff takes time, and they deserve to be paid for their craft.
Yeah, but we don't choose what the billionaires spend their money on.
Oh, of course. Some very subtle lighting in like the Cyberman chest units as well. So that's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, and they make the most of the camera scripts as well. It's a very well directed story anyway.
Yeah. Again, I think the thing that really pushes it over the edge for me though is that slight bluish tint. I think that actually like helps to complete it. If it were purely in black and white, it would still be fantastic, but I think that slight tint, like something about that, like makes it very subliminally captivating to me.
Makes it pop off the screen, doesn't it?
Yeah. So very well done, Planet 55. You have access to all of my orifices. Okay, moving on.
Yeah, it's a shame because this was the last one they did.
Yeah.
Oh, it sucks.
And I don't know if
that was so good.
I don't know if they're still around or not.
Well, this came out 9 years ago.
Yeah, if they're still around as a company, I imagine they would have been commissioned, but I doubt it. So I'd have to look into it.
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
Anyway, we move on to the Macra Terror. This is a collaboration of Sun and Moon Studios and BBC, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
2 studios worked on this.
Yeah.
On the cartoony scale, I'd say it's kind of interesting because obviously it's more on model than like say the Mission to the Unknown thing. Like the characters are less exaggerated in that respect, but in terms of like detail, in terms of like certain movements, it is kind of cartoony.
Especially because it's got the similar aesthetic that the BBC studios did with Power of the Daleks, but it's even less shadowed because it's made in colour.
So, like, despite being more on model, I'd say it's more cartoony than Mission to the Unknown.
Oh yeah, maybe not quite as much as Galaxy 4 though.
Yeah. In terms of success, I think we've got a double whammy because I'd put this right to the top as well.
Yeah, of the BBC ones, this is definitely the best one. I do have a couple of nitpicks. There's one scene with that revolving door that really pisses me off.
Oh yes! Oh my god! Yeah, the one that scene's so funny.
Yep.
Where it's so for some reason like Jamie walking through it and then he sees the guy there. I've forgotten his name. That's embarrassing to me. That reveal, fair enough, but the fact that doors keep swinging faster and faster until they stop, that's really jarring, and I don't know why they do that.
The other thing is they had to completely remove a scene as well, and that also annoys me.
Yeah, the fact they had to cut corners, again, I don't blame them, like, it's budget, time, whatever, but, like, this is another reason why I'd want them to do a special edition of this, just to make it extra perfect, just to...
Yeah. Now, what I will say is the location work is absolutely sensational.
The design... Yeah. The background's phenomenal. All the character designs. Like, the shading, the cut... I don't usually watch the animations in colour, but I'm looking at this clip in colour. It's so well done. Like, the colour palette is pretty bang on. Shading is excellent.
They took they did take quite a few liberties with this, especially with the scene where the Macra picks up Polly.
Yeah, they do. The Macra is 3D cell shading, like the Daleks, and they do they blend them pretty well because I think they interact more. Like when that Macra picks up Polly, obviously it's a 3D thing picking up a 2D thing, and I remember them blending that really well.
Yeah, they still try and maintain a bit of that paper mache, which is quite nice.
Oh yeah, a little bit, yeah. They even add some sound effects as well, just to sort of like emphasize sort of certain actions, like when Ben, like of that scene where it's picking up Polly, like I think the sound effects of like Ben twatting it with a stick were like added in post, which is fair enough. Ben and Polly, likeness wise, not the best, but I can roll with it. Jamie, he looks the absolute best he has done in any of these like later animations. Like some of the later ones, I'm like, who is that? But Macroterra Jamie, I think, is pretty bang on.
It's also, this story is also sensational when it comes to lighting. It's very good.
Yeah, like there's a lot of not a lot of lens flares, but there's a lot of like good tone. There's a lot of good gradients. Like when there's scenes of like moonlight or sunlight or whatever. It's a really good like particle effect there.
It's also able to, it's able to capture Troughton's specific mannerisms.
Yeah, which is interesting because obviously it's less detailed, and you'd think with less detail it would look less like Troughton. And like yes and no, because obviously it doesn't look as old as him, but it still captures like the essence of him pretty well. Like he's very bouncy, he's very like the facial expressions he does, like when he's shocked, when he's surprised, when he's like smiling, when he's just sort of passive, when he's like being conspiratorial. I think
they can maybe get away with it a bit because Troughton does look younger in season 4 than he does in the rest of his run.
That's true, yeah. But they capture it really well. I think they make a good balance with how much detail they omit for that cartoony vibe. Yeah, I think they hit the right spot there.
The most cartoony scenes is when you get something like, that scene where it's like, they'll crawl over you. That's quite cartoony.
Yeah. I forgot they even animate a little bit of the end of the moon base on the front of it to make it a more sort of cohesive narrative, like overall.
Yeah, Jamie's dancing scene is also quite cartoony.
Oh yeah, that's true. Let me think. Like they capture the atmosphere of the colony really well. Like the dancers dancing to the chromophone band.
Yeah.
Like those guards look very menacing. They look like they capture that sort of like tough. If you go near them, they will fucking pummel you with bullets. Like I definitely feel that when I look at them. I know that sounds very like vibes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Polly is weirdly taller than the Doctor in this animation, I've noticed, and I don't know how to feel about that. Is that accurate? I don't know.
Annika Wills is quite tall.
Okay then. I don't know. Maybe it's just me being like weirdly specific about that. I don't know. But no, like the macra in particular look really good.
They do.
And yeah, we've pretty much given all this tongue baths. Again, I think my only loads of credit to Sun and Moon for facial animations, for like the smoothness of the characters, for like the gestures they make as well. Like, bear in mind this was coming off like the original Power of the Daleks release where the characters were really static, but there's definitely a lot of like fluidity to their movements. Like, I remember like watching like the first scene where Medoc is running through the hall, and the pilot, that's his name, he's sort of like, oh, Medoc, and he's like sort of like shaking his finger and sort of like gesturing his fist, and I'm like, yeah, that's really good attention to detail, where if this were the original Power of the Daleks release, he'd probably just be like just standing there. So they definitely pump it full of detail.
I think the thing I'll say about this is that this style of animation, it doesn't feel like 60s Doctor Who. It feels like its own thing.
Yeah, that's probably why they added that moonbase scene onto it, just to sort of just so, like, if you want to watch it separate from, like, say, a marathon, want to watch it as its own complete experience, it can sort of work that way. I imagine that's maybe the intention.
Because when I'm watching, say, like the Moon Base, which comes right before it, that feels exactly like 60s Doctor Who. It feels like I'm just watching the episode that was there.
Yeah,
and it just happens to be animated.
Yeah, the Moonbase and the Macroterra animations are both like polar opposites, yet they both succeed in their own ways. It's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, they're two very different ways of doing it, but the Macroterra mainly succeeds on how it captures its setting. It's just unbelievable what they did with the setting.
Yeah. And yeah, it's sort of like, yeah, there's a little bit of like, it's less accurate. Like they flat out ignore some surviving clips and whatnot, but it's to the story's benefit. It's to make it more immersive. It's to make it more impressive. Again, my only real big major nitpick is, the rough and tumble scene exclusion. But again, that's something that can't really be helped, or at least couldn't be helped at the time. So, yeah. But I hope maybe in the future, if they have the time and or money, they can make a special edition and put it back in. We'll see.
Yeah. You also have to remember that they are doing a full-on story from start to finish with this, whereas the Moonbase is filling in 2 missing episodes, which is different goals, I guess. And one of them's in color and widescreen, the other one's black and white and 4:3.
Yeah, exactly. So credit where it's due.
Yeah. Right, so the faceless ones.
Yeah.
This is a weird one.
Of all of them, I don't know if this is a controversial opinion or not. This one might be the most there one of them, as far as I'm concerned. It's not one I...
It was... I think people were a little bit disappointed by it because it wasn't on the level of Macra.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, Jamie looks the same. So, like, at least they kept Jamie's likeness accurate.
This also, like Macra, it does actually capture the setting and like the planes and all of that really well. I will say that the airport stuff I am happy with like it is more contemporary, obviously, because it's an Earth story as opposed to an alien planet.
Yeah.
But there is just something missing from this, I feel. There's something missing from this animation. It's strangely barren.
It's most evident when you look at the Second Doctor, I find. Because jumping from Macroterra to Faceless One's animations, it does lose something, and looking at the Second Doctor's face, I still can't pinpoint what that something is, but it's most evident when looking at him. And I think it's something to do with the facial animation. It's not as smooth, it's not as fluid. It's not as expressive, I don't think. Like, the Second Doctor often has the same expression in this animation. It's like the same sort of, like, poker face, pretty much. But that's not to say it's bad. It's still pretty good. Like,
I also noticed something about this. The stroke lines aren't black, they're brown.
Yeah, that's a good point. Never noticed that before. The lighting and shading, it's not bad, but it's just not as noteworthy, I guess. Environment details, they're pretty good.
The motorcycles and the planes look great. Like, all the vehicles are really well done. Yeah,
there's a lot of cell shading there. I see a Roger Delgado poster in the background. That's good.
Oh yeah, that would have annoyed a lot of people. Yeah, I think it definitely captures the airport thing well. But there is just something about this. I can't pinpoint what it is, but there is something missing about this animation. There's just that special flair that I don't know. This might be a thing of there is no Sun and Moon Studios in this, which might be the difference.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like, something Sun and Moon add that sort of like character animation that goes above and beyond. And that's not to say this character animation is bad. It's perfectly good. It just doesn't have that same pizzazz, that same thing. And again, it's hard to specify what that thing is.
Is it me, or is this story, this animation? It's like it's not as sharp. It's a little bit blurry. Like, do you think maybe they used a bit too much motion blur or something?
It's hard to tell. I think this animation.
It's possible that the brown stroke lines might make it look a bit soft.
Yeah. It's worth noting that this was the first animation where they animated the entire story, regardless of whether episodes survived or not. Obviously, in the surviving episodes case, they do take a few creative liberties. I've never really watched the surviving episode animations because I just see it as redundant. But like, they sort of, as far as I can tell, they go for a decent balance between what's there and what would fit the rest of like the animation.
Yeah, the Troughton definitely looks a bit clownish in the face in this one, doesn't he? His eyes are very flat, and they don't look like they're full of life.
I think this animation's biggest strength is its 3D animation. Like when it comes to the planes, when it comes to the alien, like when the planes are flying up into the chameleon ship, I think that's its biggest strength. And I am looking like there's a scene where the Doctor
it does well with its hardware, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and there's the scene where the Doctor, Jamie, and Samantha Briggs are on the floor and a laser's coming towards them. That looks pretty good. I do
remember that scene. Yeah, that was well done.
It looks pretty. Yeah. Again, I just don't think it's Oh, that's another thing. They drastically reinvent how the chameleons look.
I was going to mention that. Yes, they took a big liberty with that.
Yeah. And I don't really have any strong feelings about it, to be honest. I was like, this is a big talking point, but I don't really feel anything. I don't know. Do you have any strong feelings on it?
I mean, it's not accurate, but they still look interesting.
Yeah, they look decent, as far as I can tell. They make them look more...
I like both designs.
Yeah, I like both designs too, to be fair.
I guess you could say that the original designs have a bit more of a horror aspect to them because their face is completely alien.
Yeah, I do prefer how they obviously look on live action. Whereas this definitely... Their animated self does definitely poke it more in the cartoony direction.
I would say so, yeah. I actually think that you could argue this is more cartoony than Macroterra because it doesn't have that... It doesn't have that immersive flair to it.
Yeah, it doesn't have like as strong shading per se, I suppose.
Oh yeah.
It's weird because the aesthetic is more realistic. Like the
well, because it's actually
like
real.
Yeah, like the facial like if you look at the Second Doctor, like the Macroterra has such a cartoony aesthetic that like some of the characters are almost missing noses, whereas like the faceless ones, no, everyone has detail. Everyone does have like, you know, appropriate sort of facial details and stuff, but at the same time they're not as they're weirdly more cartoony despite looking more real. It also has quite a famous animation goof up where the Doctor and Nurse Pinto are sitting on the plane, and Nurse Pinto is meant to say something. Like, she says something. She says, "How long do we have to wait, Doctor?" or something, or "How much longer, Doctor?" And yet, I don't know what happened, but they just forgot to animate her. So she just sits there, doesn't say anything, doesn't move, doesn't move her mouth. Just her line plays, and she just sits there.
I definitely think this could do with a special edition.
I think so too. Just iron out all the kinks.
Just give it to Sun and Moon Studios.
That said, I am very grateful that it brings to life that scene of Troughton threatening airport security with a bouncy ball.
Yes.
One more move, and I'll blast you all to smithereens.
I will say, this story does animate Samantha Briggs quite well.
Yeah. It brings us a lot, because Samantha Briggs is weirdly a character that I've never been, like... I know some people are like, oh, like, she should have been the companion instead of Victoria, and I'm like, I don't really see much to her.
I don't know if she'd have the same longevity.
Yeah, I mostly see her as just kind of bratty, to be honest, but, like, the animation does give her, like, some more endearingness.
I like her as she is, as a one-story companion.
Yeah, same. I don't think... If she stayed on, I don't think she would have worked.
If she stayed on, she might not have played Queen Victoria in Tooth and Claw.
That is true. And then where would we be? Oh no, where would we be without our Queen Victoria in Tooth and Claw?
I'm not amused with this animation.
The correct form of address is Your Majesty. God, we have to do lemon squeezing at some point. That's what I have to say about it.
I don't count the Infinite Quest in Dreamland as true lemons.
True.
You know what, actually, now that you've mentioned that, I actually think Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor would fit really well in animation.
Probably. I mean, you've not seen him yet, so it's hard to tell. But probably.
Well, he is quite. He also has quite an easy. Well, I don't know for sure because I'm not an animator, but he doesn't. He is obviously quite young, so he doesn't have a lot of wrinkles in his face. So he might be, and he's got quite a sort of an animated look, if you get what I mean. A
character who looks younger is kind of a double-edged sword for an animator because it's less detail, but at the same time, that also runs a higher risk of them ending up looking generic. Like, I think the Macroterror is a pretty good example of that. Because
the other thing is that it seems like the 15th Doctor is going to change their clothing a lot, which would make it really a nightmare for animators.
Yeah. So in terms of success, I don't actually know because it's not bad.
I want to say
just not in.
I want to say slightly above the middle.
Yeah, and it feels like a shame to put it lower than Galaxy 4 because, like, Galaxy 4, in terms of its actual movement, is more stilted than Faceless One's animation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also weirdly more creative.
That's true.
I think I'd bump it up a little higher.
Well, the thing is,
like, just
Galaxy 4 is quite good for Big Finish creative standards, whereas this is quite low for BBC Studio standards.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
It's perfectly fine, perfectly watchable. I wouldn't say no to watching it. It's just...
I'm considering we expand the cartoonish side so that this can go here, this can go here, and then this can go, like, sort of here.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So they all have their own little space to breathe.
Well, the thing is, what is more there's not that many that are more cartoonish than the Underwater Menace. There's maybe one or two.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so...
Evil of the Daleks.
Next. In terms of detail, like in terms of how realistic it is, I need to look at the clips. So
from what I understand, this one seems like a bit of a compromise of everything that BBC Studios has done. It seems like a bit of everything.
Okay, so I'm looking at clips now, and I'm remembering more about it. It includes 3D cell shading for Daleks, which, you know, is good. I don't think it does it as well as Power, but it still does it decently. It's BBC Studio style, so fluidity is pretty good.
It has very thick stroke lines.
Yeah, I'm noticing that too.
And Troughton's eyebrows are very intense.
Yeah, weirdly, the design, like the character designs, are more cartoony than the Faceless ones. At least I think so. Because Jamie...
They are, yeah.
Jamie starting his weird trend of looking nothing like Jamie. He also, Hugh points this out a lot to me. He has weird, like, boob lines on his jumper.
Yeah.
This isn't the only animation where he has it, but for some reason, like, they emphasize his man tits
I will
in these
say,
animations.
I love the way Maxtable looks.
Maximal looks good. I think this animation, all the character designs look excellent except for the Doctor and Jamie, who look weirdly off.
Yeah, the Doctor seems very square.
Yeah, it's hard to pin down. And then Jamie just looks like anyone. I don't know like who it's...
I will say, the thick stroke lines on the 2D characters makes the cell-shaded Daleks seem quite contrast to them.
Yeah, I suppose.
The Emperor
I mean,
Dalek looks great, though. I will say that.
The Emperor Dalek looks great. Kemal looks fucking hot. Like, sorry to be shallow, but he looks. I want to fuck him.
BBC students, if you're watching, he wants Kemal hentai right now.
Background detail, like I'm looking at like Maxtable's house. It's really well detailed.
That's true, yeah.
Look at these. Like, there's a shot in the trailer of like him, like one of the guys looking at the Doctor and Jamie through binoculars. That effect is really good.
Yeah, I have to bring this up again. The stroke lines are very inconsistent in this story. It's so noticeable how the Daleks have none, and yet the Doctor has a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. The fight scene between Jamie and Kemal. You've not seen this animation fully, have you?
No, I haven't.
There's the fight scene between Jamie and Kemal is the highlight. It
Right.
looks superb.
I see.
Absolutely. Like
So this story captures its action well, is what you would say.
its action is really good.
Yeah, I mean, even the sword fight I've seen in the trailer looks pretty good.
Yeah. Environment. Yeah, the sword fight looks pretty good from the trailer shots I'm looking at right now.
It seems to get... It has a very good eye for lighting and steam, this story. It's quite a steampunky animation in some respects.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
At least in the Dalek
coffee-
stuff is.
In the coffee bar, there's quite a lot of like smoke effects. And I'm like, ooh, that's good. There's... Yeah, it's got a very good eye for details like that. It's got very good action. It's got very good cell shading. But the lining is very inconsistent, as you say. Also, you can probably notice this in the trailer, but there is a lot of shots. They'll do a lot of POV shots, like especially in conversation scenes with characters. They will have, like, say the Doctor's talking, then Jamie's talking, then the Doctor's talking. They will like sort of cut from the Doctor and Jamie, and each of them will just be looking straight at the camera, as if the camera is like the other one's point of view.
Yeah.
And it's very strange.
Just saw a shot of Victoria crying, and I could just hear Twitter rolling its eyes.
Victoria looks really... it looks surprisingly like her.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. So, I feel like your point about this looking more cartoonish than the faceless ones is pretty on point, actually.
Yeah.
I'm tempted to say that this is kind of around... From what I've seen of it, it seems like it's sort of around here-ish.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I think the placing is pretty fair enough too.
I want it to be slightly below Power, because I think Power captures Doctor Who much more, and the Daleks especially.
Yeah.
I just think, yeah, the sort of the inconsistency between the 2D characters and the cell shading is just very noticeable. The settings seem pretty good. The lighting seems pretty good. This is a really solid animation. Given the fact that it's 7 parts and they did it all in color, I think it was quite an achievement.
Yeah. Also, like the Dizzy Dalek scene, as you can see there, they do it really well too.
Yeah.
Your biggest issue is the lining and sort of like the inconsistency it creates with the cell shading. My biggest criticism is the way the Doctor and Jamie look, because I don't know who they are.
Yeah, Jamie especially looks really strange.
Yeah, I don't know who that's meant to be.
Jamie looks really posh and concerned.
I see what you mean, actually.
When he's supposed to be a lad.
His hair looks really neat.
And fucking the difference between like thin cut and thick cut chips. It's like this is thick cut Trouton.
Yeah, I kind of see what you mean. Yeah, like the hair is right, the nose is right, the jowls are right, and yet for some reason all of it together it doesn't look quite right. I'm not sure what it is.
And when he opens his mouth, he looks like a damp cloth. It's really strange. He's too symmetrical as well. Like that's the problem. Is he looks really symmetrical for some reason.
Yeah, it's probably so it makes it easier to flip the model.
Yeah, but Maxipal looks the best. He's so good.
Yeah, Maxwell looks really good. Waterfield looks really good. Kemmel, oh my god, I'm hard. Victoria.
God.
Victoria looks really good. All the other supporting characters from what I remember, like Ruth Maxtable, like Kennedy, so on and so forth. From what I remember, all the other characters look really good, and obviously the colors are nice too.
Yeah,
it's not as. I mean, obviously the blue of the Dalek City is very vibrant. That is. Again, I don't tend to watch these animations in color, but blue for the Dalek City is a very fitting choice.
Mm.
Yeah, it's good.
Yep. Then we have The Abominable Snowmen, which is by BBC and Big Finish Creative. It's like a collaboration between them.
Yeah. I've went to this one in person. Let me just look at the clip. Because I sent you the clip in DMs. Like, it's not just the trailer, it's an actual clip. This is the latest that Big Finish Creative did.
It looks really really how do I describe it? It looks like thick caramel. That's like the only way I can. You know when you watch like a I don't know, like the opening of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory film, and you can see the chocolate being made, and it's like this melted stuff being piled up. Or you watch any Cadbury ad where they're showing the caramel melting. There's something about like the way that the colors are done that make it look really thick in its texture.
You have this really weird way of like viscerally describing things, and like
it kind of has the in terms of the faces, it's very similar to Fury from the Deep, isn't it? In some respects.
Yeah. It's the same team as Fury from the Deep. They're using the same models of like to Jamie and Victoria as well.
So it's got like the Slender Man arms, but they're wearing different costumes, so it's not as noticeable, like the furry coat and whatnot.
Yeah. It's the best that this style has ever been. To the point where like I think it's a pretty good animation. Like environment details are surprisingly decent.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've got a really good location to work with the Himalayas.
Yeah. Again, it's mostly, like the Galaxy 4, my biggest sort of critique of it is that Big Finish Creative aesthetic. I'm not really... It's not my favourite.
I mentioned the stroke lines being thick on Evil of the Daleks. I'd say the same for this. They're just very outlined.
Yeah, they're very thick. Sometimes
Jamie looks really skinny in this. He looks starved.
Something about like some elements they don't cap. Like something about the Doctor's fur coat doesn't look quite right. Not sure what it is.
It's too skinny. He looks like a martial arts instructor.
Yeah.
The fur coat is supposed to make him look big, like a big bear.
Yeah,
and it's supposed to, like, the way he fits it in the story, the coat is too big for him. It's oversized, whereas this feels like it's actually the right size, which doesn't fit.
Yeah, It's very strange.
Like, it just looks like a furry shirt as opposed to a big blanket.
Yeah. The Yeti, they're fine.
The Yeti are quite cartoonish in the actual story.
Yeah. So it's not really something I can really complain about. It's just like, yeah, it fits. If the boot fits. There's a lot of when you get to the monastery, there's a lot of 3D usage again, like the Buddha statue and the walls of like the monastery. They use a lot of 3D there.
This is almost the Big Finish creative equivalent of Evil of the Daleks in a way, in how they've gone about it. It's almost like a compromise of a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, true. Probably the biggest creative liberty they take with this story is Padmasambhava. They make him look completely different. Because in the original, it's an actor with some like yellow face aspects, but also with like weird old age makeup at the same time, and he's sort of like conniving and sort of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing kind of thing. Whereas in this animation, they make him look extremely skeletal. Like he pretty much looks like a zombie, and he's got very greenish.
Yeah.
Like his eyes are hollowed out. Have you seen images of what he looks like?
I haven't, but I know there's a lot of boomers that didn't like this animation because it made the Tibetans look actually Tibetan. As opposed to being white actors dressed as Tibetans.
Yeah. Never had a problem with the way that if this animation, like, actually making it look right. Don't mind it.
I don't mind Tibetans looking like Tibetans.
Yeah. So it's like these people are like, oh, but you're erasing the original actors. Like, Sonny, they're lucky that they're animating this story at all. Pipe the fuck down.
Yeah, you can still watch you still watch episode 2 and see it, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see why they would want to just spend extra time making it look like a British actor with a Fu Manchu mustache, It's like, why would you want that?
Yeah. But there's also, there's odd moments in this. Like, it's the Big Fish creative style, but there's some moments where they actually do go above and beyond. Like, specifically in the climax, like the Doctor's mind battle with Padmasambhava. Like, it's very climactic, because Padmasambhava starts levitating like a demigod. And there's, like, a lot of wind effects, like the Doctor's hunched over. And, like, it's very dramatic. It's a very dramatic moment. The sort of, it sort of livens up the general Big Finish creative style. And there's some moments that obviously a lot of the time it is those just models that they serve, but they're not my favorite. But other times they will actually sort of draw characters looking more dynamic. Like when we first see Travers, he's sort of holding a gun and hunched over. He's sort of looking about from left to right. They actually animate that surprisingly decently. And the Tibetan designs for characters like Tomney and stuff, they're pretty good. Don't really have much else to say.
I think I heard Samuel Davis say they should have added a soundtrack to this story.
No. There is a weirdly the scene where the second Doctor plays the recorder is weirdly oversized. Like, it's stupidly large. Hold on, if I can find the part in the trailer.
It's a shame, because the scene where he plays the recorder in Power of the Daleks works really well.
Yeah. No, if I send a photo, you can put it on the screen in the video. Dear editing Connor, put this on the screen. There it is.
Oh.
Yeah, that's like a dildo.
Yeah, that's pretty monumental.
It's huge. But yeah, I think it's pretty decent. But yeah, cartoon wise, I'd say It's probably about on par with Galaxy 4.
It
Maybe
might,
a bit less.
the thing is, it's in the Himalayas and not an alien planet, so it's a little bit more
Yeah.
realistic in terms of its location.
Yeah, a bit less then. And in terms of success, oh god, it's going to get really crowded in this area.
Yeah.
I think it's better than Galaxy 4, not as much as Evil.
Right. So what are we gonna do here? Might have to
I think that's-
slightly segregate things a little bit. Yeah. There we go.
That'll do. It works pretty well. Also, I asked Gary Russell. Oh, this is infamous now. I asked Gary Russell at the BFI why the Second Doctor has green eyes in this style. And someone who works at the BFI, I'm not naming names, later tried to like harass me for asking that question. But screw that person. But the answer Gary Russell gave was actually really informative because he wrote a Doctor Who book called like Invasion of the Cat People or something, where he described like, because it's a story with cat people. Cats have like green eyes, I guess. He wanted to give the Second Doctor green eyes as well to sort of emphasize his alienness, and that's sort of something that's transitioned to this style, I think, and it works. I think it works fine.
Yeah, because the thing is, obviously Patrick Troughton has blue eyes, but in the black and white stories, you can't see what they actually look like.
Yeah.
The only thing that makes it a bit of a continuity error is that the 3 Doctors, the 5 Doctors, and the 2 Doctors exist.
Yeah.
Now it's time for a hot take.
Oh.
Because I know that a lot of people really don't like this one that we're about to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the Ice Warriors. I understand why, but I actually do like this animation. I just think the reason why I think a lot of people don't like this is because it is more cartoony than a lot of the other ones that are around it. It has quite flat faces on the characters, and it does make the Ice Warriors seem a little bit more they're not as scary as they look in the live action because their bodies are quite exposed.
Yeah.
But
I think it's pretty good.
I still think it really works though. I really like it.
Yeah, same. I think a lot of people didn't like it at the time, probably because it was the most cartoony at that point, and the BBC was sort of scared to dip their toe in that sort of area, and people just weren't used to it.
Yeah.
Maybe? I don't know. That's not to say it doesn't have problems. It definitely has its lazy moments, like
Yeah, this one is by Curios Entertainment. It's the most unique one because there's no other one that's like it.
Yeah. It definitely has its lazy moments. Like some characters with asymmetrical features are just lazily flipped over. They don't bother making like sprites for what that asymmetrical character will look like from the other angle. They just flip it, which is a bit lazy. But
there's no like definition of skin. Like everyone looks really pale in this story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most skin definition anyone has is the Doctor, who for some reason has a 5 o'clock shadow in this animation.
But I will say though, they do capture his eyebrows and his eye dimensions quite well in this, and like the sort of bags.
Yeah, they capture like his likeness is pretty good. It's just for some reason he looks perpetually pissed off.
That is true. Yeah, he does look like he's sick of everyone's shit.
Yeah, and the lines are very thick too. But I think, I don't think that's an issue here. I think it works pretty well. It's very fluid. It's almost Macroterra level fluid.
Yeah.
It's almost like this is like the Macroterra's half forgotten sibling in a way.
I think this is the most underrated animation, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's pretty decently smooth.
The Ice Warriors do have very thick thighs, though.
Oh yeah, Victoria always perpetually looks sad as well.
Yes, she does. I guess
She has
maybe,
the same.
Maybe people say that because in the live action, the Ice Warrior costumes are quite dark in their color, whereas in the animation they're quite bright.
Yeah, that too. I think. What else? I think the body language is decent. Like, characters bounce and move and are pretty fluid, and like there's a part where the Doctor's sort of like crawling around on the floor and like working out equations and stuff, and it's a scene that works really well. But I think some of his body language is a bit elastic, but it's still very fluid nonetheless, and it makes for a pretty decent viewing experience. It's also the story with one of the animated episodes has the Troughton fluff, where he says, "There's one thing you could do to me, for me," and they actually animate that flub, and they animate like his sort of like, they animate him like sort of flubbing it, and then sort of like having a shocked facial expression for a split second before correcting himself.
Yeah.
I think one.
Do you think maybe the reason why people don't like this as much is because of how flat it is? It's very
That could be
two-dimensional.
That could be it. I will say there is another really like absent detail in this. There's no real environment work. Let's not say there's none, but it's not really. When you look at like the background details, they're all very blurred out and basic. And granted, some of that is because it's like a base. It's very flat. It's very undefined. But even like outdoors in the glacier, it doesn't look. The backgrounds don't really have much definition. I don't think. They don't really catch your eye, which to be fair is fine because the characters are like the focal point of the scene. But like compared to one of other animations, the backgrounds are a bit. But
yeah, I just think they need to rework the textures of this. Is the main thing I'd say. Everything's just a bit. Jamie especially, like his face is just so. It's just it's like a vacuum of skin there.
Yeah, it's decent. In terms of cartoony, maybe about Macroterra level.
Yeah.
In terms of success, probably on par with Mission to the Unknown. Maybe a little higher.
Okay.
I think that is good.
Yeah. I haven't seen Evil of the Daleks, so I can't say. I think this also might be a case of it's quite a stark contrast from the surviving episodes, so maybe that's why it's a bit more jarring.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite have the same atmosphere as the surviving Ice Warriors episodes do.
That is true, yeah. One thing that's really good about it, though, the lip sync. It's superb. It's really good.
Yeah, it's very fluid.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all I have to say about the Ice Warriors animation.
Yeah, I think it's really overhated. I've seen a lot of people say it's like the worst one, and I don't understand that.
Me neither, especially in comparison to the next one.
What, the Web of Fear?
Right.
So, we've gone for full 3D animation with pencil-drawn faces.
Yeah, cell shading.
It looks like...
everything.
It reminds me of, like... I don't even know how to describe this one. It's so fucking weird.
Right, so... the environments are all 3D and cell shaded. And not gonna lie, the environments I don't have anything to complain about. I think the environments are perfectly decent. I think the tunnels are a bit overlit, but like the actual set design texturing of the backdrops I think are perfectly fine. The characters, on the other hand,
the character models are the worst ever by far. They are appallingly bad.
Yeah. They've gone for 3D cell shading, but they are also mocapped, and I don't know how this got past like testing. I don't know how they didn't look at it just like, oh, that looks like crap. Let's maybe not do that. And I don't. Me and Dylan, I showed this to Dylan like a couple of Halloweens ago, like as a video on his channel. I recommend watching that video, Lord Slar channel, Web Fear Animation Reaction. It's like it's sort of its own entertainment spectacle in a sense, because like like every new character that comes in almost looks worse than the previous one.
The Brigadier is unbelievable. Well, technically it's not the Brigadier, it's the Colonel. But Lethbridge Stewart, it's just... I can't believe it.
Lethbridge Stewart looks like a Thomas the Tank Engine, like... You know, in Thomas the Tank... Like, in the model series of Thomas the Tank Engine, you have, like, the model, like, wooden humans. He looks like one of those.
You're talking... I was talking before about eyes being too small in these animations. This one, the eyes are ridiculously small.
Yeah, like pinpricks. The Doctor, like, for some, like, he has this weird paradox of too much neck, but also no neck at the same time. Like he has a really, like, his head is really high up from the rest of his body, but then when you look at it from the side, for some reason, it's really thin. Like, it's almost towards the back. And also, like, the bridge of his nose is really far out as well. It's, like...
Unironically, your animation of Lethbridge Stewart and the Doctor meeting is like fucking 100 times better than this.
Oh god, yeah. Not to fan my own ego, but hell yeah.
It's not really about ego. It's about having standards. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Like, the Doctor just kind of looks like a Neanderthal. Victoria looks like a weird porcelain doll.
And fucking Travers. Travers is unbelievable.
Travers looks like he has, like, some weird encrusted growth on his face, where his beard should be. Like, all the characters, like, Jamie, I don't know what happens, but he's missing a chin. It's, like, it's weird. Like, it's like his chin and neck are the same thing.
Who's that female character that the Doctor bangs? Like,
Anne Travers. Yeah, she looks... Poor thing, like her cheekbones, like they get massacred.
Yeah. How do we feel about the Yeti in this animation?
They might be the worst part. They should be the easy part. They look like little Halloween decorations. And like the little Yeti model that, like, you know, the little Yeti models that they pick, they look like fucking chicken bones from KFC, like, when they pick them up. It's like, oh yes, it's a chicken bone, Jamie. So, like, it's marginally better to watch in black and white. Marginally. Because at least, like, black and white does just inherently have some atmosphere about it, but it's still just abysmal. Like, for some reason, the Second Doctor's coat is really long. Like, I know Charlton's coat was fairly long to begin with, but it's like a dress.
Fucking
other characters...
Jamie's arm movements, he looks like a Lego man.
Other characters like Driver Evans, Staff Arnold, Captain Knight, they all just like... No. Just no thank you. Again, the one redeeming thing about it is the set design. There's one part where Travis has a goddamn boner. I'm not joking.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And there's another part where it looks like the Doctor punches Victoria. That's not what he's meant to be doing. He's meant to be, like, clicking his fingers in frustration, but because of the camera angle and, like, the ferocity at which he does it, it looks like he's punching Victoria on the arm. It's ridiculous.
Unironically, the fucking Who Recons one that was made in what looks like Google SketchUp is probably better to watch.
Probably, yeah. I said in a video, like a Hooniverse video, that we'd probably be asking too much for them to reanimate this, But then I realised that since they did a special edition of Power of the Daleks, there's nothing stopping them from doing a special edition of this. The only problem is that it came out on a special edition. So they'd have to do a special edition to special edition.
I just say wait for episode 3 to turn up, to be honest.
Probably, yeah. Which
So-
it hopefully will.
So in terms of success and fail, this is pretty easy. I'd say it's near the bottom.
Yeah, the one positive it has is the sets.
Yes. Now, in terms of cartoon and realistic, I'm not sure about this, because it's kind of a bit of both.
It's kind of sets really realistic, yeah. Character models are weirdly cartoony, and yet I don't think they were aiming for that, because with the mocapped animation, I think they wanted it to look realistic, but it just doesn't work. Somehow, in aiming for realism, they make it look worse. They make it look more like outlandish. They make it look like Satan's puppet show.
Yep. And it's just the inconsistency of the stroke lines as well within the same characters is weird. Like, the clothing has really thick stroke lines, but the faces have none.
Oh, so bizarre.
Oh, it's just a disaster, isn't it? I guess maybe we could just keep it with the word fail over it.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a reaction image.
Because it's both cartoony and also realistic.
Yeah, it's both and neither at the same time. God,
Very
screw
strange.
this.
It's so weird.
Yeah. And I'm a sucker who bought this thing when it came out.
Ugh, full price.
But I didn't chuck my original DVD away, so I have both.
Thankfully, you didn't shell out for a bloody steelbook of it.
God no. No, what I did was I bought the special edition, but I kept the disc of the original one, and I just condensed that into the same release. So I just have both.
Right.
So yeah, that's the Web of Fear animation. I do not recommend.
No,
It's probably the biggest outlier out of all of them.
it's pretty much unwatchable if you're trying to actually take the story seriously.
Yeah, it completely derails the story as well, because the Web of Fear is one of the most atmospheric, most claustrophobic, most weirdly, I don't think mystical is the right word, but like it's a very alienating, very chill-inducing Doctor Who story. Like it's a story it's a classic Who story. Like classic Who often has, you know, that reputation of like, oh, it's so cheesy, like none of its scares can really hold up. I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, I was watching The Web of Fear, and I was so on edge that I heard my microwave beeping downstairs, and my heart skipped a beat because I thought it was like the Yeti control sphere. That's how goddamn powerful The Web of Fear is as a story. Like it actually manages to make me shit myself for a split second. But this animation, it does not capture any of that. It's just
Yeah. And it was a collaboration between Big Finish Creative and Shapeshifter Studios.
yeah, and something that's real. I feel really bad because like when the animation was coming out, they put like a couple of interviews with like the leader of like the animation team, being like, "Oh yeah, this is an interesting direction we're going in," and it got so like dislike bombed, and all the comments are being like, "Don't do this again." I feel really bad for that guy, but at the same time, it is shit.
Yeah, it's a critical failure.
Like the only thing it succeeds, okay, aside from, you know, the set design, the only thing it succeeds at is if you just want visuals where part 3 should be. That's its only benefit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
If you just want something there to fill that gap, I guess it serves, but it's not good.
Yeah.
Much in the same way that if you're hungry, I guess eating like horse shit would fill you up, but that doesn't mean it's good food.
God. Moving on, we have a very debated, and in some people really don't like this one, Fury from the Deep.
Yeah, so this
this is by Big Finish Creative. I know Antonio really hates this one.
Yeah, it was the first one that Big Finish Creative did. And it was quite a stylistic departure when it came out, because we were so used to like the we're so used. Yeah,
the thing is with this one is that something like Galaxy 4 having an enlarged scope actually fits the story. Fury from the Deep is supposed to be claustrophobic, and the sets are fucking like the rooms look like a massive school hall.
Yeah,
it's too big.
Yeah, its biggest drawback is, for some reason, like, in order to make the story look, I guess, more expansive, they just completely shoot one of Fury from the Deep's biggest appealing factors in the foot. I think
this one would have been great if it was animated by Planet 55.
By Planet 55, or even by BBC Studios, because I think, again, a big thing that threw us off when it came out was that it wasn't that Faceless One style. It's not as detailed. It's a bit more stiff.
Yeah, and the Slender Man arms as well, and the really
thick
the Slender
lines. I think they actually improved the Slender Man arms in like subsequent releases, because like they're absolutely at their worst in this first appearance. Like, another screenshot incoming. Slap this on the screen. Hold on, let me get it. Just look at that.
Oh my goodness.
What is wrong with him?
Why are his arms longer than Jamie's legs? Why is his right arm's longer than his left arm? So bizarre.
It's like it's my turn on the Xbox, but
the heads are tiny as well. They're so small.
Yeah, it's got that. It's the first and worst of that Big Finish creative aesthetic.
I think the only thing I really like about this is Victoria. I think Victoria looks pretty good in this one.
Victoria looks good. I think like some of the background not background characters, but like the supporting characters, they look pretty decent. From what I remember.
Mr. Oak and Mr. Quill are pretty good.
Yeah, Oak and Quill, Robson. How am I forgetting their names? How am I such a fake fan? I'd know them otherwise. Fucking all the supporting characters, I think they look fine. Oh god, it's really bugging me that I'm not remembering their names. Damn it. But yeah, there's a lot of really needlessly spacious set design.
Yep.
And there's also a lot of moment.
Why does it look like the Doctor has had like an allergic reaction to a bee sting in this story? Like his face is very puffy.
Yeah. And there are a lot of moments like this as well. This might be the worst shot of the whole one.
Oh yeah. The Chris Chibnall thing. They all stand in the line.
That is the absolute like worst shot of the whole like animation. That is like you can't even like even if they're just standing there, like at least have them have different like shocked postures, not just posing. I think this animation is better if you watch it in black and white.
Yes, definitely.
Because it does retain some of that atmosphere.
Again, Jamie's face is very generic in this.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's eyes are just too small, his face is too puffy, it's very weird.
Yeah. Sometimes the seaweed it feels weird to say this, but the seaweed is over animated, I think.
Yeah.
Like Mr. Oak pulls like he pulls his sleeve back, and then it really like wriggles out. But something about it is just too much. Like it needs to be toned down a little more for that psychological factor, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just creatively speaking, they just went too opposite of what they should have with this one.
Yeah. That said, I think when the lighting is dark, it's really good. There's specifically a scene, something like this, like the heart-to-heart that the Doctor and Victoria have, like in the room. And yes, it's got like Spanish subtitles for some reason.
Alex, over home, please.
But I think the lighting of that scene, if it was lit more like this, I think it would be a bit better. Like if it was lit like this throughout, if it were darker.
They've given Victoria like Amelia Clarke eyebrows in this story.
I see what you mean, yeah.
Constant peril. Where are my dragons?
Hell yeah. But now other characters like Van Lychens and Maggie Harris and just regular Mr. Harris. That's their names. I finally remembered them. Jesus Christ, it took me too long. I should be ashamed of myself. Yeah, they look fine. Like, the character designs are fine. Even, like, the Dr. Jamie and Victoria, like, I think they're passable, but they're not, like... It's that Big Finish creative style. It's not my favourite. Also, it has the worst lip syncing of all the animations. Like, out of all of them. Like, there will just be long periods of time where, like, I don't know, like, a sentence will last, like, 10 seconds, and then the mouth will move for, like, the first 6, and then it will just close, and then the sentence will just keep going. It's like...
Yeah.
Come on. Come on.
So, on the cartoon to realistic spectrum, does it fit in sort of around the other Big Finish creative ones, would you say?
I would say so, yeah. I think it's probably about on par with the Abominable Snowmen.
And then maybe
as
just
for success and
below the line?
part of me doesn't want to be too harsh to it because Fury from the Deep is one of my favourite Doctor Who stories, but at the same time, part of me does want to be harsh to it because it doesn't really do it.
I don't think it's as bad as people say. I think there's actually some redeeming things about it that are quite good.
Yeah. Again, when it does work, it does work.
I think it's
obviously
better
not.
It's definitely. I think it's easier to forgive it if you really like the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
The scenes towards the end of Part 6 with Victoria's exit are actually really well animated.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's part of where it's almost where like kind of the stiltedness of some of the animation actually kind of works, because obviously in that scene Jamie's like trying to crack like wise talk with Victoria, and she's just too sad to let it through, and it's kind of like awkward and sort of like hard to sort of like, you know what I mean. So being kind of like wooden in that scene does kind of lend to that scene's strengths. A lot of the rest of the time, though, not really. And yeah, the lighting can be good.
Works better in black and white, I think.
It works way better in black and white. Like if you're gonna watch this, watch it in black and white. Like it'll be way better.
Maybe we could be a bit more forgiving and put it towards the middle, like a mixed bag.
Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, I think that's perfectly decent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame. Hopefully, they definitely got to do a special edition of this.
They have to do like an actual, you know. I feel like this one would actually this story would benefit from a realistic animation.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. Yeah. I think like the cutesy Planet 55, not Planet 50. Why do I keep confusing them? The cutesy Big Finish creative style works with more. I don't want to say inconsequential, but inconsequential stories like Galaxy 4. If you gave it to like the Myth Makers, for example, I think it'd be fine. If you gave it to even if you gave it to like the Celestial Toy Maker, I think it would be fine. But to Fury from the Deep and even the Abominable Snowman to a degree, I think they would have worked better in a different style. But hey ho, can't change the past. Hopefully they get recovered.
Oh yeah, I'm sure if Fury got recovered, it would be great.
Blow this animation out of the water.
Well, I mean, the censor clips are already teasing a lot of good things.
Story that looks really well directed as well.
Yep. As does Power of the Daleks, which is by bloody Chris Barry, who's a legend.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, next is The Wheel in Space.
It's a bit of an odyssey. Short. Because it's 10 minutes of part one. This was made around the same time as the Macroterra one, by the same team, I believe.
Yes and no. I don't think Sun and Moon were involved. I think it was just like the faceless ones.
Yeah, BBC Studios.
Yeah, I'm just gonna.
It's definitely not as budgeted as Macroterra, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's definitely more of a draft.
I've seen like I've just come across an edit on YouTube that sort of like splices because it's a because it's a truncated version of episode 1, it omits like the Victoria departure and like, you know, Jamie being mopey and stuff. But I've just come across an upload on YouTube that sort of like sews the ending of the Fury from the Deep animation into this. I'm like, huh, it's pretty decent. But yeah, it's that faceless one style. In some ways, if they actually do animate this fully in this style, like if they keep these clips and just flesh out the rest of the story in this style, I think we'd be looking at something pretty decent. Because even though the character animation is of that faceless one's ilk, and thus I don't think is not much to write home about, I think it's perfectly fine. The set design is extremely good, and the servo robot looks extremely good.
Yeah, I think I also would say that the Doctor looks a bit more accurate in this than he does in the faceless ones.
I think so, yeah. I think that's a fair assessment.
Can't say the same for Jamie, unfortunately, but
he has a weirdly long nose.
Yeah,
and man tits.
Yeah. I would say of the BBC ones, this is actually one of the less cartoony looking, apart from Power, obviously, because Power is a lot more shadowy.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is helped by the set design. The servo robot also, like, despite being cel shaded, it has a lot of texture to it as well.
Yes.
Like the metal of its surface is very patchy. And the shading on it. So yeah, it's fine. I think I'd just feel more strongly about it if, you know, we got the full story and if this wasn't just a test.
For this test one, they definitely stuck to camera scripts, so it's a bit more still in terms of its direction. It's not quite as dynamic.
Although I think that works because it's sort of the Wheel in Space Part 1. I know you've not seen the story, but the Wheel in Space Part 1 is a very isolated, very... In some ways, it sort of makes me think of 2001: A Space Odyssey, or like the opening of Alien, maybe. Like, it's a very still, very like space. No one can hear you scream. That emphasizes like how lonely the characters are. It's just Tu and Jamie in Part 1.
I almost want to put it here, like around this area, because I actually think it's slightly more realistic by BBC Studios standards.
Yeah. I think that's fair enough. Have you actually watched the clip all the way through, that 10-minute?
Yes, I have. I've actually reviewed it.
So that's the most experience you've had of the wheel in space?
That's correct.
Huh. I look forward to watching it with you someday.
Yes.
It'll probably be like 3 years in the future when they've actually animated it. But
it's hard to compare to full stories because it's only 10 minutes, but what they have done with it is a good start.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I will say the doctor does the doctor does look a bit sunburnt though.
See what you mean a little bit, yeah. I'm just looking. Oh yeah, he is weirdly pink, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like not just tan, pink.
Yeah.
Heyo. That's the Wheel in Space one.
Yes, now, here we go. The original 2006, The Invasion. Now, this is a very unique one. This was done by... let's see. This was done by Cosgrove Hall. And this is what I like to call the Samurai Jack Doctor Who animation. Because it definitely fits the mid-noughties Cartoon Network look, but it does also have a bit of texture as well to the faces. It's not quite as flat.
Yeah. It's by the same team that did Schalke, I think. And I think people involved with this would end up going to work on the Infinite Quest. It's the same sort of aesthetic.
Yep. I think this is not quite as realistic as Planet 55, but I think it's more realistic than BBC Studios is, because there is a noticeable difference in the way that the models are built, I guess you could say. It's got a sort of... It does look a little bit like all the characters have food full in their mouth, especially the Doctor. But... And you know, it is very clearly of its time. You know, it definitely does look like an animation from 2006. But yeah. I think there is an attention to realism. I think the characters actually look like the characters. They actually look really... Like, Zoe especially looks exactly the same as the real Zoe.
Yeah, Zoe and the Doctor look good. Jamie depends on the angle. Like, sometimes he does look weirdly Asian.
I don't know what it is, but for some reason Jamie's really hard to get right in animation.
Yeah. It's from some angles, especially from the front, where he looks kind of Asian. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. But the settings are all really good. The one noticeable thing... Oh, actually, I will say, I think the Brigadier looks really good in this animation.
The Brigadier looks fantastic.
Yeah. Fucking way better than the Web of Fear. Way better.
Yeah. Vaughn looks fantastic. Packer looks fantastic.
Yep, the Cybermen as well. Cybermen look great.
Isabel. Yeah, obviously they only have that one scene, and of course there's that trailer that they did. Yeah, it's pretty good. There's a lot, because it's one of the older animations, and obviously, you know, they're on a budget or whatever, they make the stylistic choice to use silhouettes a lot.
Yes, they do.
I think that actually really complements the story, because it's at least the opening parts of the invasion are very conspiratorial.
Yeah,
it's like...
I will say, the action scenes do remind me a bit of Java games.
Kind of see what you mean, yeah.
There's that one scene where they're walking out of the building and it's silhouettes just sort of like with very small frame rate, just like going up and down in the background.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like in part 4, like the like when Jamie and the Doctor are doing that rescue mission for Zoe and Isabel, and they're sort of like sneaking around, and you just see their silhouettes in the background, and like silhouettes of the helicopter and like fire.
Oh yeah, the helicopter scene is exceptional. I love that scene.
Yeah, it's great.
I also think the cutest thing is the fucking cow at the start.
Oh yeah, and they all laugh at seeing it on the scanner, like ah ha ha ha. It's a really nice animation. It's held up. There's a Bad Wolf Easter egg in there. I've never spotted it, but it's in there. So it squeezes the lemons.
Yeah.
See, that should put it up the list of it. I
think it is bordering on more realistic than it's how would you compare it to Power of the Daleks in terms of realism?
It's a weird. I think it's both more and less. Because I think the characters are less detailed than in
This is
Power.
this is what I'll say. This is the one where they look the least like pencil drawings out of all the animations.
I think
It
that's fair
does.
to say.
Yeah, they look more like I don't even know what to compare it to, but they just don't look like pencil drawings.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think in terms of like the character detail, it's not as obviously there's gradient to the faces, but I don't think there's as much detail as there is to Power. But at the same time, there's parts of it that do feel weirdly more grounded than the Power animation.
I think one of the more impressive details is like Zoe's eyelashes.
Oh yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, that's another funny thing to notice. People always complain about the recent animations like not being accurate, unlike the originals, when the original doesn't have Zoe's sparkly catsuit. So
That's true, yeah.
but yeah, it's got that sort of something about it does feel weirdly like even though it's less detailed than Power of the Daleks, something about like the movement feels more realistic. I'm not sure what it is. It does feel more choppy, but like again in a moon-based kind of way. Like that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
And again, that usage of silhouettes really makes it distinct. It really like makes it memorable.
I will say
just
it does make the Doctor look like he has a lazy eye in this story.
oh yeah, he does have really strong bags under his eyes in this animation. Like they are very strong. But yeah, it makes this animation really vivid. Especially like, you know, when the driver is gunned down by those by Vaughn's men.
Yeah, and also I will
that's-
say the background stuff, it reminds me a lot of like old Disney films, like the way the grass looks, the trees, it's almost like a matte painting in animation.
I see what you mean. Oh, do forgive me. Yeah, I think it works. It works
Yeah.
pretty well.
So I'd say it's probably a bit more realistic than Power.
Yeah.
And in terms of success, I think for me, I don't know about you, but for me personally, I think this is actually one of the best ones.
I'd put it neck and neck with Power, honestly.
I think its execution for the time is really impressive.
Yeah. It's another case, it's probably one of the best cases where I don't mind the episodes themselves, like the original episodes being missing, because they're really good supplements.
They are, yeah.
Same as 10th. It's a weird case of all these Cybermen stories getting like really good supplemental animations.
Yeah, the only thing about it, and this is the thing that I prefer about Planet 55, is it's not as intense. The intensity of the Planet 55 ones just adds something really special to it.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
But it's still an enjoyable watch for sure.
Sorry, I'm just in the comments section of one of the animation clips and it says, I'm a massive simp for Zoe. Good for you.
Yeah. But yeah, I reckon around here is pretty good.
Yeah. So that's all the animation. No, I'm kidding.
No, and now we have Sharda, which is not a missing episode, but it's a cancelled episode. Not cancelled for moral reasons, but cancelled for budgetary reasons. And,
we have Sharda and Sharda.
We'll go with the BBC one first. This is the same team that did Power of the Daleks, right?
I believe so.
BBC Studios?
I think so. It's hard to... I think the animation techniques are decent. I think in terms of like an animation, it probably beats like faceless ones and stuff.
So I think the best thing they do that's really impressive is the transitions between the live action and the animation. I think they do a fantastic job of blending those two things together without it being jarring. I really like that element of it. But I will say though, the I guess I could say like the three-dimensional location work on it, because Sharda is set in a place that's supposed to have a lot of outdoor movement, and it's quite an action-heavy story in terms of dashing about, as a lot of Tom Baker stories are. There is a bit of a weird robotic fluidity to some of the camera work, especially that first animated scene with the bike. Like, it's very noticeably not... it's very digital. I also think the quality of the faces depends on which shot you're looking at. Like, sometimes Romana looks like Lala Ward when you look at a close-up, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes she looks a little bit weirdly jumbled.
Sometimes she looks like she has a very scrunched up face.
And like
someone just grabbed her by the...
like I've said before about other animations, Tom Baker's eyes are just too small. He's got these insane bags under his eyes, and his eyes are just too small.
Yeah. It's also trippy just seeing the Fourth Doctor in animated form.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
They do capture his mannerisms well, but the actual resemblance, you can tell it's him, but the eyes just don't look right to me. They're just too small.
Yeah, that's fair. K9, the Krogs, the floating balls, they're all cel shaded. They look really good. They have good particle effects as well, like K9's laser.
That's true, yeah. Oh yeah, there's quite a few like realistic elements in the sense of like the costuming of the they maintain some of that classic Who sort of laser effect and also paper mache like aesthetic to a lot of the non-human elements, which is nice. I also would say that the Sharda prison itself is quite an interesting design too, and it looks very cartoon book like. There is a blend of realistic and cartoon in here for this one.
Yeah. This is probably going to be a big point of like disagreement between us, but I actually like really disagree about the jumps between live action and animation. I've always found it extremely jarring. So we're gonna have to somehow find a middle ground on that one. But then again, we are talking more about animation than, transitions, I guess.
I think the non-main characters look pretty accurate.
I think so, yeah. What do we think of Skagra?
Yeah, I think he works in terms of his animation, but it's obviously not the same. His face might be a bit too difficult to detail in this style, but he's definitely distinct.
It's also hard to talk about this animation without talking about, because the animated versions are performed decades later, like the performances are obviously different. Tom Baker is much softer and much more cuddly and much more...
Yep.
Like he's reading a book to you, rather than, ad-libbing across the set.
Yeah.
Lala Ward
sounds quite different now.
Lala Ward, she does this thing on Big Finish, on like everything now, where it sounds like she's enunciating everything.
Yeah.
There's no like casual off the cuff flair like she had during like the Williams era. It's very specific.
It's probably because it's hard to capture that Williams era thing on audio.
Yeah.
Because it's a very in-person chemistry they had. And she, at the time, was obviously in love with Tom, and they fed off each other's. They fed off each other's energy really well back then, because she would kind of mimic him a bit.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And then the guy who plays Skagra, it's actually the same guy. Like he came back decades late. Like he didn't come back for like the McGann adaptation, but he came back for this. And he gives a completely different performance, because in the live action one, he's more campy and theatrical. Whereas in the animation, he's more like scheming and underplayed and more, more morose and contemplative, I think.
We also get a scene at the end with the actual old Tom Baker in it as well.
Yeah. Honestly, my favorite moment would probably be, I can't remember. That's it. It's from Chronotis' TARDIS to the Doctor's TARDIS. They set up a corridor that the Doctor's got to crawl along, and they falls into the vortex. And obviously, they didn't film that at the time. That's like modern actors, a modern like body double, like filming that scene. But it works really well. Obviously, that's not the animation, but it's my favorite moment.
This is probably the only example of BBC Studios animation where the sets sometimes look too big.
Probably.
Especially the exterior scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it hard to really say anything else about it, because I don't really return to Sharda that much. So I also don't really think about this in the same league of as the missing episode animations. I almost feel bad for saying this, but there's a part of me that kind of wishes we actually got just an actual missing episode animation in place of this. But
Tom Baker, it makes money.
Oh yes.
Yeah. In terms of the cartoony realistic spectrum, it's an interesting one. I think they have to go realistic with this, don't they? Because they're matching it with actual footage.
I think it's more than Faceless Ones. Maybe in the middle, I guess.
Yeah.
As for success,
it's difficult to grade, isn't it? It's difficult to grade. I almost wonder if this is the one that's going to end up directly in the middle.
I think so, yeah. I have no strong feeling, because I already said I find the jumps, like, between mediums really jarring.
I don't know if it would be able to get away with this animation if it was a less good story.
Yeah. But I find the jumps themselves really jarring, but the style itself, I think is fine, but I just don't feel strongly about it. I don't know what it is. In some cases, I think it's better animated than, say, the Faceless Ones. But at the same time, I also feel less enthusiastic about it. It's probably because I don't really care about Ashada that much. It's a fine story, but I'm not, like... the mythology around it, I'm not entirely, like, invested in. But...
I haven't embedded myself in that culture as much, so I just watched it as it was, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe one day I'll return to it and I'll sort of view it in its own merits.
I mean, if the season 17 Blu-ray has it as a 6-part story now.
Oh god, yeah, that was another thing that's really, like, thrown me off it, because I can't really... Watching it as a movie, like, the pacing doesn't... Something about it just doesn't click as a full movie-like thing.
Yeah.
As an omnibus. If I could watch it as a 6-parter, like... But I don't collect the Blu-rays, so I'm not really... Yeah, that's not gonna happen. Also, you know how, like, Troughton looks sunburnt in Wheel in Space? He also weirdly looks sunburnt here as well.
Tom Baker, you mean?
Yeah. Troughton's not in this. But no, Tom does look weirdly sunburnt in animated form too.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I actually do think this meets the standard, so I think it's fine to put it here. But what I can't say about is the Ian Levine version of this.
I've only ever seen, like, one clip of it, and that's all I need to see.
Yeah, this one tries really hard to go down the realistic route.
Yeah.
It's bordering on like this area here.
Yeah, and it kind of ends up in the uncanny valley.
Yeah, because it actually tries to have the real faces.
It tries to have the real faces, but then the lip flaps don't look right at all. The mouths are just like nah 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 nah.
Yep.
Um,
And I think from what I've seen of it, it's pretty bad.
yeah, just to slag off Ian Levine, let's just put it at the bottom. I'm seeing like
I don't know if it's as bad as Web of Fear though.
probably not. I'm seeing like this clip of like Thor and Romana and K9 in the TARDIS, which is a scene that didn't exist in the original story. And the 3D elements and the 2D elements jar really hard. Like, K9 is not cel-shaded, he is just 3D.
What I don't understand about this is that the Mission to the Unknown animation is completely different to this. It's so different. It's insanely different.
Who knows? Who knows why? Ian Levine's just gonna Ian Levine, I guess.
Yeah. This one looks like it's made out of bloody Play-Doh or something. It's very strange.
Yeah, there's a lot of like over shading on the Doctor's face as well in this clip that I'm watching.
Yeah.
Oh, and whoever does the Tom Baker impression, just no.
Well, yeah.
Oh my god, I found another scene from it. This is the... Oh my god, it looks even worse.
Yeah, I mean, so based on this graph, it seems like there is this little consistent diagonal line here where it says if you go too cartoony, you will slightly sacrifice your success. Because if you compare like Macro Terror, which is slightly cartoony, versus Galaxy 4 and Underwater Menace, which are very cartoony, it seems to chop a bit of that quality out.
Yeah, they haven't really found a good outlet for being like extreme cartoony and great. They haven't really carved that niche out.
I mean, maybe
yet.
the Underwater Menace outside of the trailer, if that's great, then maybe that would be the one.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm kind of doubting it.
Oh yeah, the character models
sure
alone.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be decent. I'm sure it'll be watchable, and I'm excited for it. But I'm not thinking it will be like the revolutionary. I don't think it will make me satisfied in the same way as watching the story completely recovered and existing would.
Yes. So when you look at the successful ones, like the Moonbase and all those ones around it, Power, Special Edition, Invasion, 10th Planet, Macra, Evil, what that kind of tells me is usually realistic if you edit it well, unlike Reign of Terror. It actually works really well for 62, but you can actually pull off cartoonish, you just have to put in a lot of work.
Yeah. I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
I agree with that, as an animator myself.
So, subtly cartoonish and with a lot of really good lighting work and staging can be really effective. The alternative to that is try and make it realistic and, you know, Planet 55 style and, you know, Cosgrove Hall and the lighting stuff they did with the Power Special Edition seems to be a good recipe for success.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. In terms of... Oh yeah, no, you go.
I was gonna say probably the best recent successes are with cel shaded 3D and with lighting effects. I think those are the greatest innovations of the more recent animations. The older ones probably win in detail though. That's all I have to say on that.
So in terms of going forward, we'll discuss kind of the creative direction that we would ideally want to see for each of the remaining ones. because I think each story has a different way you could go about them to make the most of them. So I feel like with Marco Polo, something with the scope of the Galaxy 4 animation would be a good idea, but I also feel like Big Finish Creative might not be able to really get the tone right.
Yeah. I think
there needs to be a lot of vibrant color, that's for sure.
I think something with the scope and vibrancy of Galaxy 4, like the Big Finish creative team, would be good, but with the detail of Planet 55, if you could somehow marry those two approaches together, that'd be great. But
the intensity of the 10th planet is a good example of it, but I suppose maybe because that's a Cyberman, based on the Siege story, that might not quite work for Marco Polo.
Maybe not.
I guess if you look at some of the scenes from Evil of the Daleks, like the action scenes, that might work in terms of BBC studios.
I specifically think the detail of the Reign of Terror animation, I think that would suit Marco Polo really well.
But if it's coloured like Galaxy 4...
Yeah. And if it had that same scope as Galaxy 4 too.
Yeah.
I guess I think the Crusade would need that Reign of Terror style, but with good editing.
Yeah, I think the Crusade it needs to be intimate, it needs to have a lot of character. I think my main issue with the Crusade is that they would want to try and do the whole story, and I don't want that, because I think the surviving episodes are incredible. Like, I genuinely think episodes 1 and 3 are so perfect. I would really like it if there was some way that Planet 55 could do Crusade in black and white and 4x3. I don't know if it's ever possible, but that would be my ultimate. There was some way you could afford to have the Crusade with its bloody 26 costume changes or some stupid thing like that.
Yeah, and it would take years to do, but it would be worth it.
Yeah.
Official Mission to the Unknown, don't really care.
I think what we have already is fine. Ian Levine's one and the remake.
Yeah.
The Mythmakers.
I think I'd be happy with the Big Finish creative style of Galaxy 4 for the Mythmakers, but that's because...
I do too.
That's because the Mythmakers as a story I don't really care for either way.
But I think that a scope is the most important thing for that, and also the vibrancy of it.
Yeah, scope is important, and just because the Big Finish creative style is more limited, that doesn't necessarily mean it would neuter the story, because
they also
as I said,
have the models for Stephen and Vicky already.
Yeah. Yeah, just because that style is more limited than, say, Planet 55 or BBC Studios, that doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't be able to express the story beyond the confines of it being missing. Because, as I said, Galaxy 4, the animation really highlights the comedy of that story. So, animating it would probably redeem the Mythmakers in some way. Because
I also think that they have a really good opportunity when it comes to the Trojan horse scene.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I think Big Finish Creative should do that one for sure.
Yeah, that said, I think the Trojan horse would work better as cell shading, which Big Finish Creative tend not to do.
Yeah,
but we'll have to see on that one.
Now, this is the hardest. I have an idea for this one, but it's really difficult to manage. I think that with the Daleks master plan, you need to somehow get 2 to 3 studios to all work on it and maintain a consistent style.
Yeah. I think they'd all have to work on it at once. Like, some people are like, oh, one team should work on...
You need a bit of everything. You need the intensity and the detail of Planet 55, but you also need the scope of Big Finish Creative, and you need the sort of consistency
fluidity
of BBC, of studios, and Suncorp. Like, that's a beast to do that one.
Yeah, some people think, oh, you should just have one team do parts 1 to 7 and the other team do parts 8 to 12. No. It needs to be consistent all the way through.
Yeah, and I don't know how they would do it, but I imagine there might... I think, because obviously with Planet 55, that's probably never going to happen again. but there is probably some way that they can combine Big Finish and BBC Studios together for this one.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The massacre.
Well, Mr. Ian Levine seems to claim he's doing it, but I call bullshit on that.
Yeah, no, he wants me in his animation sweatshop to work on it. But when at the Galaxy 4 BFI, when Peter Purvis was asked what one he'd want animated in that style, he instantly just said The Massacre. And I don't think The Massacre would fit with Big Finish Creative.
Nah, I don't either.
I think the Reign of Terror style would actually fit it most of all, like Planet 55 style.
Planet 55, but well edited. The intensity of the drama in the 10th planet would fit The Massacre really well.
Yeah. Only problem is Planet 55 never animated whole stories, but like say they came back with a vengeance and did that, then I think we'd be onto something.
Yeah, Massacre needs to look as realistic as possible. It can't be cartoonish, it's too serious.
Yeah, imagine like... Can you imagine like the massacre itself being depicted with like Family Guy like death poses? Like,
oh god. The massacre needs to be treated with like tender love and care because its tone is very important to its story.
Yeah.
You can't really you can't like. Well, basically what Ian Levine's been doing is there's animated stills of photos that were taken, and they look good, but they're not. That's not what an animation would actually look like because you're actually having to create something new.
Yeah. Celestial Toymaker, I'm fine with it being in the Big Finish creative style.
Yeah, I think it would work for that because you need something like in the underwater menace category of being able to utilize a lot of color and a lot of sort of craziness to it. Yeah. It needs a lot of elements, and Big Finish is seemingly the only one that can really expand and do a lot of things with it.
They might give that story a sense of scope as well, because obviously it's very restricted.
Yeah,
some people say
it's the polar opposite to The Massacre in terms of what you need to do with it.
Yeah, some people say that the Toymaker being restricted is actually a strength, but I disagree. I think it being limited is actually kind of hurts the story.
I would be interested. I think I would be very interested to see what they would do if they took creative liberties with the Celestial Toymaker.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. The Savages.
Now, I reckon BBC Studios could do this one.
Yeah.
Because I think The Savages is fascinating because it has scope of a historical, but it's actually a sci-fi story.
Yeah. I can imagine it in like a Power of the Daleks style, honestly.
Yeah, I could also imagine it, maybe not quite as creative and have as much inspired ideas, but I could see it in the sort of Macro Terror style thing, without obviously the monster element.
Kind of fitting, because it's both of them are Ian Stewart Black stories, so...
Yes.
It's kind of
That's
interesting.
true.
They both have that same sort of level of intrigue, like utopian society, but they're built on this exploitative element.
Yeah, I definitely think The Savages would fit the BBC Studios thing. I think it can get away with a bit of flexibility.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think it's just it might be hard to market though, because it's not really a monster story, it's more of a political story.
Yeah, it's hard. See, there's a reason why like they've kind of avoided like doing the historicals bar the Reign of Terror, because they want to go for big like marketable monsters they can bank on.
Yep.
So doing stories without a villain per se are kind of hard.
I'm curious to see what Dodo looks like in animation.
Yeah, they've not touched her yet. That'll be interesting. Smugglers.
The rumor is this will be the next one after Underwater Menace, so I would assume it's probably BBC Studios, right?
I think that rumor, because Underwater Menace getting animated turned out to be real, but the Smugglers was actually having its censor clips colorized. That is something that actually happened. And they were
Right.
broadcast at the BFI. And I think what happened was whoever leaked that got their wires crossed and thought both of them were being animated. They could possibly both still be animated, but I think that's what went wrong there.
I see.
As for animation, I don't really care. I don't think the story is... I think the story could work with a Big Finish creative style.
I think it could be BBC Studios as well, but I don't know if they can capture it properly. It's a strange one, because I think that the reason why I want to say BBC Studios and not Big Finish creative is because the Smuggler's real redeeming quality is its characters and not its plot. And you want to have characters that can be well animated as opposed to because the Smuggler's environment isn't that interesting. It's more so the people that are in it.
Suppose, yeah. Don't really have any strong feelings about it.
Yeah, I feel like I wouldn't really mind either way, just don't make it terrible.
Highlanders, BBC Studios, please.
I would say so, but I don't know if they can do the tartan.
The fact that they considered doing it tells me they probably can.
Yeah.
I think when they said too much tartan, I don't think it means they can't do it. I think it was more like, that would be a bit of a challenge, wouldn't it? Let's work up to that.
I would say that the Big Finish creative might be able to capture the setting better with like the Highlands and the boat and whatnot.
Possibly, yeah.
I also think if what was the one that did the Macroterra with BBC?
Sun and Moon.
Yeah, you might be able to, if they collaborated with them, possibly, you could get something out of that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can see that.
I wouldn't be surprised if BBC Studios went down, I know it's not contemporary, but if they went down the sort of Sharda route with the Highlanders, it wouldn't surprise me if they did that.
I can see that, yeah.
Not sure.
Wheel in Space, just extrapolate on what's already there.
Yeah, BBC Studios 100%, for sure.
And Space Pirates, hire me.
Space Pirates, I think I could see Big Finish Creative doing it because of the locations.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's the only one I can imagine them do, because I can't really imagine it as a BBC Studios thing.
Yeah, but I also think that BBC might capture the characters easier. I'm not sure.
Possibly.
I don't know. I feel like with Space Pirates, they probably want to go balls to the walls with its style and take a lot of liberties. So possibly Big Finish is the best option.
Yeah, because the BBC are definitely aware that Space Pirates is a pretty rock bottom reputation. And I think to really capture that sort of audience, it'd have to be a very imaginative style. And then again, that's another one like the Savages that would kind of be hard to market because you don't have a monster per se.
Yeah.
Sure, there are pirates, and that might have some pull, but you can't really bank on a antagonist. Really memorable, distinct antagonist. But
if Big Finish Creative did it, the settings in the trailer could be quite appealing.
Yeah,
because when you look at Galaxy 4, you look at the space shots, you look at space ships. There seems to be something there with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. But yeah, that is all the missing stories. That's our wishes for all the missing stories.
Yes.
But how will they... Oh, wait, no. Never mind. I was about to say, how will they animate Diesel? But I animated Diesel.
Yep.
Full disclosure.
I will be honest, it would be amazing if they animated the Feast of Stephen.
Oh, yeah. True, yeah. Yeah, full disclosure, Colin once had a dream there was an extra season 6 story called Diesel, and the whole plot was the Dr. Jamie and Zoe fueled a diesel truck.
Yep, and you animated it for me.
I did, yeah. Check it out. Doctor Who Diesel. What if I type out Doctor Who Diesel? Does it come up? It comes up with other things.
Yeah.
God, I don't know. But yeah, that is.
Would you? One more question. How would you feel about them animating Big Finish?
Depends which one. I would imagine they'd go for a very normie one, like one that isn't super.
I know that Josh Snares has been animating that 10th Doctor, 4th Doctor story.
Yeah,
The Out of Time one.
Yeah. I imagine they'd go for a very normie one. I think the easiest candidate would be An Earthly Child, because you get an extra visual 8th Doctor story.
Yeah, I
It's
feel like 8th Doctor is the way to go, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not connected to any long-running Big Finish arc. Like, there's no companion you need to be aware of. There's no Divergent Universe or Dark Eyes or whatever the fuck. The only context you need is from another TV story, The Dalek Invasion of Earth, and it has Susan in it, who is a pull in herself. So
imagine if they animated Zagreus.
Never in a million years would they do that. No, I think if they did animate a Big Finish, that would be the one. I think the only sticking point would be because Disney have sort of because they own Fox Universal. I don't know who owns the TV movie, but either way, because the rights have been clamped down on the TV movie some more, depicting that 8th Doctor look from the movie is apparently harder to legally do.
Yeah.
So they'd probably have to like rework how the 8th Doctor would look in that story. They might just go for a Night of the Doctor look, which I think would be a bit jarring, but
they might go for the look that they did in that recent Big Finish story where it was old McGann with long hair. But I don't know about that. I don't know, because I feel like Big Finish with the posters get away with more because they use the TV movie photos a lot in the early stuff.
Yeah, it's only recently that they've sort of struggled. Then again, if it's funding... Then again, say like Disney Plus... Is Disney Plus funding these new animations? Because if
I have
it
no
is,
idea.
then maybe
I mean, if Disney Plus was funding it, you'd expect them to be really good.
That is true, yeah. Never mind then. But yeah, I imagine if if Disney has some involvement with the franchise now, maybe they could jiggle their way out of the weird TV movie copyright thing. But
if Disney could get us a moon base version of the Daleks Master Plan, I would be incredibly over the moon.
If Disney Plus could get us like all the missing episodes returned,
I don't know if they could buy that.
Who knows? They could just go up to some collector and be like, not even for £2,000 million. I don't goddamn know anymore.
If Missing Doctor Who could be animated like the Arcane TV show or whatever the Cyberpunk one was, that'd be crazy.
That'd be wild, yeah.
Yep.
I
honestly, if the Daleks Master Plan was animated like Arcane, I think the fans would genuinely lose their minds.
Probably, yeah. I'm just looking at like that 8th Doctor cover now. They could probably go for that look, yeah. But yeah, that has been the missing episodes animation realism alignment graph.
That's right. Let you comment on what you thought, what you think, if you disagree, agree, blah 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 blah. Yeah.
I call you out, Brian or Antonio or whoever's on the next video or previous video.
That's for Worst of Classic Who. That's not for this.
Oh, I'm doing it anyway.
Anyway.
Oh. Hey ho.
I bid you adieu, a goodbye, and a good night. Bang.